Hello, everybody. This is criminal profiler Pat Brown, and this is the call-in of the week. So maybe of the month, but it all depends on how many great folks I have to call in. And today, got a wonderful call-in person, Joe Stunner, and we kind of bonded, shall we say, over boxing, which has nothing to do with criminal profiling at all. But I have a boxer in my family, and he's a big boxing guy and has a boxing channel from the UK. So we hit it off. And so he's been hanging out with us for quite a while as a subscriber and as a patron. So he's here today. Hi, Joe. Are you there over in the UK?
I'm still here, Pat. I'm here. I tell you, you say that we bonded over boxing. Believe me, there's plenty of criminality in boxing.
Oh, well, that is true. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't really realize that, but yeah, it just kind of, there's a lot of breeding of criminal handling of things in the background with some of the managers and the promoters. So yes, there is quite a lot of that. My brother-in-law had 4 different promoters in his lifetime, and some of them are in prison. So I would say, luckily he isn't in prison, but it's very disconcerting when you've got a promoter and you're very excited, and then there's a huge shootout someplace, and your promoter is one of them, and yeah. And then he goes to prison, and then you need a new promoter. And eventually, as my brother-in-law did, he got up to Don King. And
enough said.
Yeah, enough said. I won't get into the old Don King and how much of an ethical human being he was. But yes, Don King. Anyway, let me welcome everybody who's in the chat. My goodness, we have a huge chat room, Joe. You're super popular. Wow. You didn't realize this, did you? But oh my gosh. And I put, and we kind of did this on the fly because last night I said, my family's going off to the beach and I'm going to be all alone on Friday and the rest of the week. So I'm like, hey, I should do one of the call-ins. And then I asked if you'd do it, and you said yes. And so by the time I told everybody, it was actually just about 6 hours ago. So I'm like, I hope somebody shows up. But anyway, guess what? People are showing up. We got Carolina from North Carolina, who says it's muggy but no alligators. That's good. Gretchen is here. Lisa S. is here. She says she's hot as hell in Connecticut. Let's see. Florence is here in Seattle. It's cooler there. And Carolina says she can see and hear me. Thank you, Carolina, because we need somebody to tell me whether can you hear Joe as well? Are we like equal? That's important because it's very hard to balance the sound on these shows. So I'm still working on understanding that. Reticent Robin's here. Woohoo! You finally did make it. Yes, from Northern Kentucky. All right, Robin. I'm so glad to see you. Doreen is here too. Anne is here from Canada. And yeah, I think I've got everybody, but I'm sure there's going to be more coming in, and I will probably miss people saying things. Joe is a little quieter, but I can hear both of you well. Okay, Joe's quieter.
Hello to everyone, if you can hear me.
Okay, is that better? Because I'm trying to decide whether I have to play with a dial here or Joe's just going to start it. Using a very strong voice.
Just tell me to talk louder, and I'll talk louder.
Can you talk louder than that? A little louder?
I can talk loud.
I don't know if it's also the volume on your phone. Does that make any difference? I don't know.
I'll give it a go.
Or I can move up your sound. It's funny. I actually turned your sound down a little before we started the show because what was happening was I was hearing myself was quiet and talk louder, please. Okay, I'm gonna turn Joe up. Hold on a second. I'll figure out how to do it.
Can you hear me now?
Okay.
Can you hear me?
I'm gonna turn you up one. Okay. Can you hear Joe better? Is that better, everybody? Let me know whether you can hear Joe better than you just could hear Joe. And if you don't hear the horrible hum, because I don't like humming on my shows, but I just turned up Joe's thing. Hi, Lisa. Pat doesn't notice I'm here. Lila, I do see you, Lila. So I'm going to start with what sound we have, but while we're talking and about a couple of things in the beginning, please do let me know if I'm screaming and Joe is whispering, or are we sounding kind of equal now and you're not having any trouble? Sorry, hold on. hearing either one of us. Okay, so anyway, I want to ask something just at the beginning here, because since you're from the UK, Joe, and I found it fascinating when you're from different countries, there are these iconic cases that each country has a thing for, that they're kind of obsessed with. And I'm going to ask the US people, what are your 3 most iconic cases in the US that you think are the US criminal cases? And Anne and anybody else from, I don't think anybody else is here from Canada, throw some Canadian ones at me, and then UK. So I'm going to start while people are going to tell me what they think. Oh, and wait a minute, Lisa N is here too. So New Zealand, you got to give me iconic cases from New Zealand so that I can maybe do those one day. So Joe, what are your 3 top things that you would think represent, not necessarily in a good way, but represent the UK as far as criminal cases go that nobody can let go of, that they're most fascinated with? What do you come up with?
Well, the granddaddy is the Jack the Ripper case, which is, I'm from London, and Jack the Ripper is part of the culture and the, it's the legend, if you like.
Right.
It's fascinated me since I was a boy. So, since the last 50 years, say, I've read countless books on it. And I think the intrigue is that it will never be solved, or you may have a different opinion, Pat. I don't know, but I think I have my sort of top 5 people who I would put on the shortlist. But
well, I'm gonna ask you about that, because I said I was being very cagey because you said talk about Jack the Ripper, and I agree. I think that is the number 1 UK case, but it's also, I think, the number 1 world case. There are, if you want to, if you go on YouTube and you put in a name of a case, you put in Jack the Ripper. Yeah. My God, I was trying to find. I'm going to introduce something. One of the Stephen Keogh. I don't know if you know him. He's a just retired Scotland Yard detective. He just did a bit on Jack the Ripper on his channel, which I'm going to link below, because I have a lot of respect for Stephen and I like his channel. And you know how I'm very careful about promoting anybody. I promote him anyway. So the information to come in on it, I wanted to listen to the show, right? So I forgot to look under, the things I subscribe to, right? And I just went to the search on Google, and I put in Jack the Ripper, and I put in most recently posted, right? I couldn't find them because like every 5 seconds, somebody had posted a video on Jack the Ripper, and that doesn't necessarily happen. So like if I do a show, let's say I do a show on Judy Smith, for example, which I'm doing, what day are we on? Friday, which I'm doing on Sunday. I put Judy Smith on, and if I've done a show recently, I might find myself there, either at the top or 3 or 4 or 5, somewhere in there, right? I couldn't find his, I was like, well, good Lord, where is it? Because that many videos every second are put up about Jack the Ripper. So I think worldwide, people are super fascinated with that case. There's, just tons of Reddit boards on it, and there's just everybody's opinion. How many, when I went to do the show for Mystery Files on Jack the Ripper, and I was doing my background on it, I was like, how many books do I have to buy, to research this case? It's crazy. So.
Yeah, and also you've got to sift through the good ones and the bad ones, and the ones that maybe not great, but might contain a little sort of kernel of truth that you hadn't previously thought of.
And at a certain point, you have to give up on most of them, because this is one of the problems. There's a lot of tosh on essentially a massive, people talk about, and this is, I'll bring up this point right now. So I'm going to get back to everybody's ideas and your next 2 as well, but I just think it's really important on Jack the Ripper. The longer a case goes cold, the more historic it is, and the more evidence people present, or shall we say facts, I put quotes around both of those, more theories, or more gossip, more anything. Something came out of the media from back in the day, in their newspapers, from their police reports, which may be questionable right there, and their commentary on their own stuff. So it's so overwhelming that what happens is the amount of suspects becomes just astronomical. Whereas if it's a more modern case, the suspect list is very small, but over time, everybody in the universe is added, because somebody comes up with, oh, well, this could have happened, that could have happened. And we lose sight of the basics of the case. And when I do my video on this, that is what I'm going to point out, is that there are some very basic things about this case, which lead to some maybe a good suspect. I'm not saying my suspect is necessarily the suspect, but that at least it's based on very, a small amount of information that makes sense rather than everything in the universe, which is which is where we get very confused. So I'm going to ask you in a minute about your suspects. So I want to find out, which are the two cases? What would come next to Jack?
Okay, well, I guess the next one I would choose is actually the one where I kind of discovered you, Pat, because it's I think you gave a 20-minute interview to an Australian radio show, and it was on the Madeleine McCann case.
Oh, was that the one that stabbed me in the back and I tried to sue?
I don't know. I don't know. I can't remember. I watched it years ago, a long time ago.
I had one. Now it depends if you're talking about now I'm just blanking on his name. What the heck? The really long name, Mark Sanokonoka. I can never pronounce Mark's name.
Oh,
Mark,
no, I know the guy you mean. Yeah.
Oh, he's great. He's great.
Yeah, he's good. Yeah.
And then I did, I think, two more. One was a shorter news thing, which was okay. And then I did one for Sunday night, and Sunday night libeled the living heck out of me. And that made, I had a lawyer come in on that, and it went into the British press, and profiler suing Sunday night. And so they edited the living heck out of me, and even put in questions that I hadn't actually answered. I gave the answer, and then they changed the question to a different question. So I looked like I was answering something else. It was like very, very, very disreputable. Yeah. So you saw me on the Madeleine McCann case.
No, it was, like I say, it was an audio recording. I think it was a woman who interviewed you, but I'd never heard that argument before. It's long been considered in England, or in Britain, that the McCann's got a sort of free pass, if you like, that the presumption that it was an abduction, and that no other possibility was considered. That's long been by the majority of people felt to be a sort of red flag. But I'd not heard anyone come out and say, in pure black and white language, we need to base this on evidence, and the evidence suggests, X, Y, Z, that they had some knowledge of it or some connection to it. And so I would say that, but certainly the McCann case in Britain is one of the quintessential, every tabloid paper imaginable has covered it ad infinitum.
For sure.
It's become one of those legendary, almost mythological things, which, as you say, the more it goes on and on, it's not been that long, has it? Certainly not in comparison to something like Jack the Ripper.
Right. But this is in people's lifetime that are here now. So for people, the Jack the Ripper thing's it's kind of, I think that's more of a thing where people who are into certain, true crime and history love the heck out of that. But people who live right now are alive and reading the tabloids and seeing the news shows on TV, the Madeleine McCann case is probably the one that has impacted them the most, because it's happening, and it's still happening now as we speak. So, and
also, I think as time goes on and it does get more distant, you will get this sort of almost like a cottage industry, well, if it doesn't already exist, arising, where you get all sorts of weird and wonderful theories, or weird and not so wonderful theories, that sort of indicate that, I don't know, Nellie the elephant abducted Madeleine McCann, or it's almost as bad as the sort of Walter Sickert theory with the Ripper.
Was that the worst? Walter Sickert theory by Patricia Cornwell. And I'm like, stick with fiction, because you just wrote it. I mean, it's like the worst theory ever. I'm like, but I want to say with the Madeleine McCann case, yes. First of all, I want to say just in my own defense as far as getting sued, which they won't do to me because I'm in the U.S. and I will fight them in court. And people wonder why the McCanns have never done anything against me outside of pulling my book, getting my book pulled off of Amazon. They did that. They got and the Amazon pulled it for a good reason because no publisher would touch the book because a book pointed out evidence that did not support an abduction. They would not touch it. So I self-pubbed that book, and Amazon's like, we're just not making enough money. I was, when it first came out, actually, my book went up to number 2 under Kate's book. But Amazon, when they got the threat from Carter Ruck, they're like, yeah, we're not making enough off of this. It's out of our bookstore. But they've never personally come after me like they did Gonzalo. And the reason, basically, in my opinion, is, well, first of all, here's what would happen. They'd have to fight me in the U.S. And an attorney is simply unaffordable. I would represent myself in court, which everybody would say would be a stupid idea, but I would get them on the stand.
And they don't want to be there.
Yeah, and I'm thinking probably not worth it. Now, so that just pointed out, but to also point out, I've never said the McCanns were guilty of harming their daughter. I've never said that. I've always said that the evidence does not support an abduction. And the evidence does support child neglect. And the McCanns, due to their behaviors and the evidence in the case, the McCanns should be a top suspect. And the rest has to be proven and then taken to court. But yes, the biggest problem we've had with the McCann case and things, the historic component of things getting bigger and bigger and bigger is that somehow, and I fight this one all the time, that there is a huge governmental entity where there's all these people in high-level places who are all into child sex rings, and somehow Maddie was kidnapped into a child sex ring or sexually abused by big people, and it's like, the case is much simpler than that, but now it's gone into and Richard Hall. A lot of people love his videos on the case. I liked his first video because he's a very good he's a very good producer of things. He has a great voice. So the first one was pretty good, and I was like, oh, okay, this is nice. And then since he does kind of like aliens and stuff, his rest of his videos started going into this massive conspiracy thing to the point of, no, this is just nonsense. But people, because he's so good at presenting stuff and giving these what look like links between people and events, there's an awful lot of people who love what he has to say and believe it's some big, huge, massive, sex ring or something. And I spoke up against that, and a whole bunch of people got very angry with me. So it gets crazier and crazier and crazier the longer you go. And so that is quite correct. So that's, so we got Jack, Madeleine McCann. Did you have one more?
Yeah. This is one that I think you've already done a video on. It's the Jeremy Bamber case.
Jeremy Bamber, yeah.
Again, I'm old enough to remember that happening. And
wow.
Well, I mean, there is still a big campaign to get Jeremy Bamber out of prison.
That is true.
I think 30+ years or whatever it is now, and he is one of only 6 guys who are going to serve their entire life in prison, I think, in Britain.
Seriously? Wow.
Yeah. Well, most of the time it's a 30-year recommendation or whatever. But
right.
And
yeah.
There's a few others, but Bamber is a Category A prisoner. It was downgraded to Category B, which gave him a little bit more freedom within a prison, if you like. But then it was kicked back up to a Category A. And there are a lot of people who are absolutely adamant that he is innocent.
That is correct.
Because his sister, who they believe killed the children and the family.
Well, she's dead. She can't fight.
No, exactly. But she did have very serious mental health issues, and that's the hook on which they're hanging it on.
Well, this is what's interesting about evidence, because regardless of her mental health issues, the evidence does not support that she committed the crime. And the evidence does lean heavily that he did commit the crime. So regardless of people's mental health issues, you have them, and it's interesting. And it could be something that would cause somebody to commit a crime. It doesn't mean they committed the crime. It's kind of like, let's say somebody's getting divorced. Doesn't mean they killed their spouse. The spouse ends up dead. Yeah. So they might have, well, I didn't want to pay that child support. I didn't want to pay alimony. I just was ticked off that they ran off with somebody else, could be whatever, but it doesn't mean you committed the crime. It would bring you into a person of interest level with the police, and it should, because you've got some motive. Yeah. But then if the evidence doesn't support it, but this doesn't matter to a lot of people who want to do let's get somebody out of prison. They will find somebody to go after, and there's a whole bunch of stuff created in the Jerry Bamber case, which is just like all kinds of twisted things to make him not guilty and to make her guilty. And so I think that one, we're going to probably see that go on for forever. Probably. But it is a fascinating case. It really was a very interesting case, and I had never heard of it until it was brought to me. So I really liked that case. So I think you picked the three that, even as a U.S. citizen, I would probably say those are three that, having done some work, stuff about UK crimes, those seem to be three pretty big ones. Let me see what they're saying here in the. Okay, wow, we got so many comments. Oh, okay, wait, I got to go back here now. Now I got to go back up to the top here. All right, let me get through the weather issues we had up here. Okay. Let's see. All right. Okay. Carolina says the most iconic is JonBenet Ramsey. I would agree with you. I think that JonBenet Ramsey is the most the well-known crime as far as what happened. And Gretchen says Ted Bundy. I think Ted Bundy is more our most well-known serial killer. But as far as the crimes, we already know who did it. So I think JonBenet Ramsey really is outstanding, because it's like, did the parents have something to do with it? Did the brother have something to do with it? Was it somebody else? And that argument just goes on. Lindbergh, Lindbergh is, I think, it is an historic case. It's out there, but I don't think very many people really pay much attention to it. They might know of it, but I don't think people are really all that obsessed with it. No, this is probably, this is good. Oh, very good, Lisa. You might be right on those three. I like it. All right. Zodiac. Zodiac is because there's a serial killer, hasn't been caught, who wrote strange letters, and people are fascinated with Zodiac. And there's been quite a lot of different movies on Zodiac. And yes, tons of theories on Zodiac. I think you might have the winner here for the trifecta. Then JonBenet Ramsey, Black Dahlia. Yeah, Black Dahlia also being just such a strange and historic case that does fascinate people, and tons of stuff has been done on that. And of course, most recently, we've had the guy who claims his daddy did it, and it's a bunch of crap if I've ever seen crap. But in case you're wondering what I'm talking about, I did the show on Black Dahlia. I have done the show on JonBenet Ramsey. I have not done a show on Zodiac, and I will have to do that. Charles Manson. Yeah, okay. I think Charles Manson is pretty, that's a pretty creepy crime, although we know who did it. We just know that there were, what was up with them. Oh, well, now we got some more here. That's pretty good, too. O.J. Simpson. Yeah, that's going to be an argument. Well, I don't know how many think he's innocent, but people are still, there is a fascination with that case. Casey Anthony, I think almost nobody thinks she's innocent except for Casey's small fan club of 10 women. But it is a case that stands out because it was so horrifying what she did to her child, in my opinion, that the evidence supports, and that the trial, the jury found her not guilty. It's kind of shocking. Oh, good. Everybody can hear you, Joe.
Oh, well.
Oh, wait a minute. Lisa says, I think you did the New Zealand cases already. There aren't many in this small country. Wait a minute. What are the two I did that are probably big New Zealand cases? It would be Bain case, which is like the Bamber case, except the New Zealand version. And Bain got exonerated and got married, and I guess he snuck off to Australia. And so Sorry, Australia. And then I'm not sure what the other one is, so let me know. Susan Smith. Well, I think we know who did it. We just think that it's like I think she kind of set off a thing, Gretchen, where we said, oh, maybe women do kill their children. I think that one. Robin agrees with the Lindbergh case. Okay. Oh, okay. Anne's got Canada. The murders of 19 female university students at the University of Montreal 30 years ago. Oh, I do not know that one. That's fascinating. Interesting. I'm going to look that up, Anne. And Lila says, I don't think there was a kidnapping. Okay, now you're going to make me go and do the Lindbergh case. Okay, more like Madeleine McCann than you think. Okay. All right, let's see what we got.
I have to say that the Lindbergh case was one that really fascinated me as a kid.
Oh, really? And what was it about the case?
Well, just the idea that, I remember being about 10 years old and wanting to solve it.
Really?
I can't exactly remember why. I just thought it was one of the first true crime cases where I thought that's such a horrible injustice, the baby involved and everything. I just thought I'd got to solve that, and guess what? I never did.
All these years and you haven't figured it out, Joe? Come on, man. Now you've really piqued my interest, so I think I'm going to have to do that case now. I mean, I really never paid much mind to it, to tell you the truth. No, one of the things about this whole channel is that, I am learning so much about crime. Because I may be a criminal profiler, but I work on specific cases and haven't been a big true crime person as far as, paying attention. Yeah. And now I'm hearing about all these cases and I'm like, oh, wow, I didn't know that case, or I know about it, but so now I'm going to have to do Lindbergh. Thanks, guys. Okay. It'll be coming up soon. What? Oh, I don't know what that means.
Do you ever find, though, that if you don't know a case and you suddenly look at it,
right,
you then sort of immediately have a very detached, unemotional view of it, and therefore you can see it a lot clearer than people that have been sort of embroiled in it? Like, for example, the John Bonet case.
Right.
Because I remember when I moved to America. I lived in America previously in '98. Yeah.
Is that what wait a minute. I remember you from that bar. Did we have a good time?
Yeah, I was a drug. Yeah, lying in his own beer. That's right.
Thanks for the drinks.
The John Bonet Ramsey case. Now, I remember speaking to my ex-wife, who was an American, and she was telling me all about it. And I looked at it really quite in a cursory way, and I said, "Oh, I think a very good suspect would be her brother." And she was sort of outraged at this. What? What do you mean? Her little brother, or was he older than her? When
he was older.
He killed her? And I said, well, I do think that's something that you have to consider. And yeah, I guess if you're not sort of embroiled in the whole emotion and the sort of the great media circus of it, you tend to sort of have a more cold-blooded look at it.
I agree. I think there's a bunch of different issues here. One is, I think you point out something very, very smart, that when it's from another country and you haven't had it come through the news programs, over and over and over again, you do have less connection to that, so you would have less emotions toward that. So I think that's a very, very smart way to think about that. The second thing is, it depends how much time you spend fascinated by true crime. A lot of people really, there are people who get into true crime because they're interested in just the aspect of evidence and solving crimes and so on and so forth. A lot of other people get involved, and it's because they relate to the victim and the victim's parents, if the parents didn't kill off the victim. They relate to the horror of it. They relate to the sadness of it, the injustice of it, wanting to see justice come about. And so, for example, with Madeleine, I don't know how many times I see, things come across on Madeleine, and there's Madeleine with little wings on her, and then there's Madeleine with flowers, and then there's all of us praying for Madeleine, and people are like, we love you, Madeleine, and justice for Madeleine. Madeleine, And everybody's still thinking of her as 4 years old, which is, almost 4 years old because she was 3, almost 4. And they have that little vision of the cute little child in their head. And there's two parts about the cute little child. Either she's alive and not a cute little child anymore, but pretty much an adult, or she's a dead child who never got past that stage and she's not alive. Yeah. And either way, this emotional connection to a child which you've never met, which isn't part of your family or your relatives, and in the world, I guess, I look at it this way: in the world, injustice to children is massive. I mean, if you're in any country in the world, you find child sex trafficking, you find children that are shot down in conflict, you find children suffering from terrible poverty. Every one of those children, to me, has an injustice because they got somebody rolled the dice for them and they, dang it, snake eyes, crap. I always feel very lucky because when those were rolled for me, I ended up with parents who remained together till the day they died in the 90s, and I grew up fairly wealthy. I wasn't wealthy, but they had money. My father ended up at GS-18 in the government. My mother stayed home, so we lived in a nice neighborhood in McLean, Virginia. And so I never suffered any. My parents didn't do drugs. They weren't alcoholics. I mean, I wasn't always a happy kid or a happy teenager because, because I was a little selfish critter sometimes. But basically, I came home to a safe house. I had a future that I didn't have to worry about. Daddy would help me if I needed help. I threw that. I'm like, 7, that's great. Some other poor kid someplace like, dang it, snake eyes, it sucks. And so when I look at Madeleine McCann, she actually, in my opinion, had a role. She had a 7 role for quite a while because I don't think there was anything in the Madeleine McCann family that was indicative of the children being mistreated. I don't see that anyplace. So sorry, folks, if all these theories you got, I don't see it. I see those children having a nice home with 2 parents, having fun, playing, getting along. Everything was fine. They went on this great vacation. I think, in my opinion, what I believe the evidence supports is poor choice of a selfishness of the adults overrode maybe being a little bit more careful with your choices with the children. And then once that occurred, then it became you're just trying to do damage control. Where if it's true that the McCanns were involved in what happened to Madeleine, they then didn't want to lose the other 2 children, and they didn't want to lose their jobs. They didn't want to end up in prison. So there would be damage control involved. And I don't even have so much of an issue with that because I kind of almost understand that. You know what I'm saying? That if you did something stupid and it ended up in a situation where you've lost one of your children, you want to save the rest of your family. I get it. I can see kind of a cover up for a reason. I think I kind of got very fed up with the fund. The fund was what did it for me, is that the fund was milking people of a massive amount of money that was not being used to find Madeleine. That's a garbage thing if I've ever heard it, because they never hired anybody reputable. There were people they could have hired if they truly believed they were looking for Madeleine. There are missing children's experts who are legitimate. I myself, if they had hired me, and said, hey, you're a little sketchy on me, but I'd like you to work with people and see if we can find Madeleine, I would have been okay with that. Not that they need to hire me, but somebody, I'm saying there's people better than me for finding missing children. So, but I'm just saying that even I would have been said, okay, they're looking and they're going to somebody who is questionable. Like, in other words, I'm not going to do all the creepy things that their fake PIs did. You know what I mean? But I don't think that was the point. I think the point was not because they knew they weren't looking for Madeleine. I believe that. So they milked a tremendous amount of money off of people, and the fund has never been properly. It's never been clear what the money was ever spent on, and how much it was sifted into places it shouldn't have been sifted into, and they're still asking for money. And they've had more law enforcement on their side than I've seen in any missing children's case in my life. In other words, Portugal, yes, and beginning with Gonzalo, he wasn't too thrilled about them. But once Gonzalo was booted out, right, they had, the Portuguese police weren't looking at them specifically. They were looking for others. They had Scotland Yard come in, Operation Grange, spending millions and millions of pounds on this thing, and they were on their side. I mean, you couldn't get any luckier than that. You don't even need a private fund. What's your private fund going to do? So you're going to get another PI compared to Scotland Yard to look for somebody, you know. So I always felt that whole thing was such a scam. That offended me more than the rest of the things. So what was it about the case that really got to you?
Well, there were several points I'd make just from what you said there. I mean, first of all, I don't think anybody foresaw just how gigantic the whole circus became, and
That's
the whole, it just grew legs. It just kept snowballing, and any other analogy you want to use. I mean, it just got to be this industry of money raising, and
there was so much to make money off of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think the reason that people were kind of slow, I'm talking about the public, not the police or anything, but the reason people were kind of slow to pick up on whether the McCanns may have had something to do with it. Likewise with the Jean Bonnet case, with the family or maybe even the brother being involved. People don't want to believe that sort of thing.
That's true.
Immediately they don't want to go there because they think, well, what if I'm wrong? And I think in England, certainly, because we, generally speaking, I'm certainly not talking about the press. We don't give a damn about anyone.
That's true.
The people actually do have a sense of fairness.
Right.
And they don't want to, they think, well, I think the parents may have had something to do with it, but what if I'm wrong? How bad am I going to look as well?
And I can tell you, Joe, that people ask me why. I'm one of the rare profilers out there who say the evidence does not support abduction. And they're like, well, none of the other profilers particularly agree with you, right? And the same thing was true with the Panama Girls case. Somebody just pointed that out, and I pointed out in the Hangout that, I believe it's an accident. It was just, it's a bad decision to keep going, and they got lost. And I get attacked for that. And they say, but there's all these investigators' profiles who are, and a lot of times people point this out. Not this person; she was very polite, which I appreciate. But a lot of people point out they're way more respected than you, Pat Brown, and they're correct. But they're correct. No, I want to point this out. But they're correct. But what happens is when you are way more respected than me, and you work for major organizations, the last thing you want to do is put something out there that gets you in a whole lot of trouble. So by coming out and saying, I believe that evidence supports this, my hate mail is massive on the Jean Bonnet case, and my hate mail is massive on the Madeleine McCann case. It's pretty massive on a lot of other cases because it's not a popular opinion to put out. So when Madeleine McCann, for example, this is a great example of this. So I was a regular on Nancy Grace for almost a decade or more. I can't remember the years, but anyway, I was on like 3 times a week. And so I was a regular favorite. And when the Madeleine McCann case came up, I was never asked to be on the show on those days. Nancy Grace made sure, or her people did. I don't know if it's Nancy, but her people did. Don't have Pat Brown on. And so because they knew what my opinion was, and they knew if they put me on there, they would have a problem. So then they put, they asked, prosecutor Wendy, God bless it, I'm going to blank here. Wendy, what's your last name? I should know it. Hold on 1 second. Hold on, I'm googling. I'm googling something on my own. Okay, so I'm going to put Madeleine McCann, Wendy. She became a kind of a darling of the Nancy Grace because she said what she did. But it's kind of funny. It was, oh come on. Where's Wendy's name? I can't. Wendy Murphy. Okay, I found it. So anyway, yeah. Oh, is she on Jane Velez? Maybe it was Jane Velez she did. Okay, I'll put in Nancy Grace. I used to do Jane Velez too. Well, anyway, what happened was some of the boards for the Madeleine McCann case, when Wendy Murphy came on, and she's was prosecutor. I believe Wendy's a prosecutor, and she's great. I love Wendy, and we're good with each other, right? But They were like, oh my God, Wendy Murphy came on and she said that the evidence did not support an abduction. And so everybody was like over the moon, right? And Jane Velez's show, they were like, you could see like deer in the headlights. What the heck happened here? How did this happen? You know how it happened, Joe? What do you think? Very few people know this, huh?
Say again?
Almost nobody knows this is what actually happened.
No. Well, look, yeah, but let's.
No. Why do you think that Wendy Murphy got on the show and she said the things that they wouldn't have me on the show, but they had Wendy Murphy.
I can only guess, but maybe she lied and said she thought that she towed the line.
No, Wendy didn't know much about the case, so she called me before she did the show. So because when you're asked to do these shows, the problem is people don't understand TV works. So it's not like they call you up like a month before and they say, we're going to do a piece on Madeleine McCann on the show. Could you research this for a month? No. They call you like 4 hours before the show and say, can you be on the show tonight? And you go, okay. And then they send you over some crap, right? And then you read through the thing you got, a couple whatever they send over. And you go, oh, and so you have to jump on it like this. So Wendy saw this. She's like, what the heck? Because she wasn't familiar with the case. So she calls me up and she said, Pat, what do you think about this? And I said, because she said, I think you wrote a book on this, didn't you? I'm like, yeah. And Wendy and I had done shows before together. We'd done Nancy Grace together and Jane Velez Mitchell together. So we knew each other and I respected her and she respected me. So she said, what do you think? And so I gave her the details and the facts on the case. Now, Wendy is not someone to just parrot somebody, okay? So I'm going to give credit to Wendy on this. I'm not trying to say she didn't know what she was talking about. No. Wendy is a smart woman. And when I gave her the evidence and we talked about it for quite a bit of time, and I said, here's all these issues, then she was like, that makes so much sense. So they had her on the show thinking she was going to be it's an abduction, blah, blah, blah. And then she ended up saying what I would have said. And everybody was like, So the show was not happy, I'm sure. But everybody in the Madeleine McCann parents are guilty world loved it. And they didn't realize that's what happened. But they never wanted me on those shows because I wasn't going to support the party line, which at that time was the safe one. It's the one you don't get sued, Yeah. That's important.
It sounds like she was your Trojan horse almost.
It was like, that's a good way. It really was like a Trojan horse. It's pretty funny. So, but there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that people don't know and why things happen the way they do and why shows, like, for example, Gonzalo and I were going to write a book together in English. An English book. And I went to my publisher and she went out to all the, because we're going to try to make it, come out from the American side of it. And not everybody said, well, that's a fantastic book. We're not going to do it. We're afraid of the lawsuits. We're not going to do it.
Yeah.
So, if I wanted to make money, I should have written a book that said she was kidnapped. And then I'd be somebody's, oh, Pat Brown's so wonderful.
But apart from the fact that most criminal profilers are just crap, and I say that as someone who isn't one, but you don't need to be a chicken to know what an egg is. Apart from that,
very, very vicious, Joe. Okay, wait. Okay, just for the fairness of all criminal profilers out there and our wonderful community, why do you think criminal profilers are crap? I gotta go with it. I got to.
Because what you're asking me why I think that? Because yes. I read most of well, I don't want to name names because that's not fair, but okay. I read a lot of them, and I just think this doesn't really make much sense. There are too many jumps, there are too many pieces of the jigsaw missing, and I just feel that, like you do, that you must base things on evidence and also leave the door open to say, well, actually, I may not be right. So the evidence points this way, but it is possible that I'm wrong. There's always that possibility. And a lot of them, especially the ones you do get on these little TV sound bites, don't seem to have that air of, one might almost say humility, or...
I don't know. I don't know that they're allowed to have the humility, but I totally agree with you. That because I wouldn't have set you up. But I too have issues with. I have terrible issues with the methodology of FBI profiling. I do believe there's good profilers within the FBI who just don't use their methodology because it's garbage. And of course, there are instances in the UK where profilers have gone and written a whole book on who did it, and then it turned out that person didn't do it at all. So yes, there is a problem with the leaps that I find in profiling, which are not based on evidence. It's not deductive profiling. It's either inductive, which just uses statistics, and the rest of it's like psychic guesswork. So I also have that problem. But I just want to say, as far as the ones on TV, the soundbite issue, this is one of the reasons that doing this show is so amazing, because I deal with sound bites all the time, and I've done shows where I'm like, I spent an hour. Let's say I've done some recent shows on serial killers. Okay, I've worked for 2 different companies, and I'm sitting down. I do a lot of research, and then I sit there, and for an hour, they ask me the questions, I give the answers, right? And I'm like, my answers were so good, and then I see the show, and I'm like, yeah, he was a serial killer. I'm like, that's what I got. That's what you got out of what I said, And so sometimes they shave it down so much you look like a dolt, or it's just it seems arrogant, because you might say something like this. From what I've been observing, it appears that this particular person did da 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 da. However, da 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 da. But the however part never gets in, and so you only see the first part.
Because they've only got a few minutes. If you're given 90 seconds to say something, what can you say? It's almost like Twitter before Twitter,
right? And they don't tell you. They don't tell you have 90 seconds. And I mean, one of the accusations I've had from my own daddy was, well, you speak too fast. And okay, I actually do speak too quickly anyway. That's just true. From New Jersey, I speak way too fast, and many people have been working to have me slow down on these shows so I don't make them lose their minds and go, I can't listen to her anymore. But on television, you never know how many seconds you're going to get a lot of times.
Yeah.
So Nancy Grace said, we're going to go to you, Pat Brown. What do you think? And you're like, how much time do I have to get this out? And so instead of going, well, Nancy, what I believe might have occurred, you don't have time for that. So you go, so Nancy, what I believe might have occurred.
Yeah. But isn't that true of most things? Isn't that true of any kind of discourse nowadays? Whether it's, I don't know, talking about social issues or anything like that. It's been boiled down to, 90 seconds. But you can't have a debate in 90 seconds.
That is true. We've lost the art of good discussion, long communication where we have time. We used to see that a lot on public broadcasting systems, where you could actually sit down and do like an hour or two talking with the host about a particular issue. And now it's like, they also don't want just one person. So there's always this this supposed debate thing, which means a panel. They call it a panel. What they do is they get 3 people on one side, and then they bring me in for the other side. And then and then I say whatever it is, and then they all attack me and make me look like a fool. Which is why I don't do any television news anymore. People wonder why. I always tell them I won't do your show. And I don't hardly ever do any of those television shows anymore, because of that. I'm brought in as a punching bag sometimes. And they're not really interested in what I have to say. They're interested in what they can do to me. You lose even if you don't agree with somebody. What you lose is the ability to learn, because even when people don't agree with me, and I point this out over and over, if you come to my show and you're commenting, you're watching the video and you're commenting below, I don't have a problem understanding where you're coming from and listening to what you have to say until you get rude. And of course, it's very interesting. As a criminal profiler, I always know kind of where it's going to go. I could tell by the opening lines, like, no, Pat, I really respect you, but you're an idiot. Okay, that's not okay. That's not how you. Or they set me up by saying they start really quiet, and then when you spend your time answering them, and all of a sudden then they go into the diatribe of how you're wrong on everything you said, but in a way that's not a discussion. It's just an attack. So we've lost a lot of that civility, I would say, and decorum, which would be nice. So I absolutely agree with you. But just that was my little defense of certain profiles on TV. The only reason I'm saying that is because I know what they're going through.
Oh yeah.
And the editing process on anything that's why I rarely do I do a show anymore on a particular case unless I'm absolutely sure they're not going to edit me, because they will sometimes bring me in if I have a differing opinion, like the Martha Moxley case. I do not believe that I believe that the tutor, Littleton, was more likely the suspect than Skakel was. So they brought me in on that just so they could attack me. But they didn't tell me that. They lied to me when they did it. Oh, we just love your opinion. We just think you're brilliant, blah, blah, blah. And then I did the show, and then they just murdered me. And they just made fun of me. And I'm like, okay, that's not respectful, because I came out as a professional. And even if I'm an opposing viewpoint on whatever, it should be respected. And that's not what happened. So I don't do much of that. So I think that the whole television thing is very tricky as far as getting to information and having people respected for that. So with the Madeleine McCann case, I don't know. I think that a lot of times they're afraid to ever say anything that could turn on them. And so when they know where the wind blows, they go with it. They go with it. I want to ask you. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, go on. No, I was just going to say, look, the old phrase, if we don't believe in freedom of speech for the people that we don't agree with, then we don't agree with freedom of speech. And this is a very subtle way of silencing people. Well, it's not such a subtle way, actually. Well,
it depends, Joe, because I've been accused of, because I block a lot of people on Facebook. I block them on Twitter. I block them on this channel. Mm. And people go, you don't believe in freedom of speech? I'm like, yes, but this is my house. You're shitting in it. Oh, no, so that I don't believe in. So I will block you if you're not going to have a proper discussion, if you're just coming here to annihilate me. And also being,
that's fair enough.
Yeah, but yes, I mean, I am very interested in what people do have to say if they're using, if they want to have an interesting discussion, if they want to bring forth a thought on something. Because as I've pointed out many times as a profiler, for example, you're in the UK and I'm in the US. I've been in England. I have not been in any place else, but I've been in England. Actually, I've been in London, and I've been in Ealing, because I lived there for 1 month. Yeah. I can't remember it, but I lived there for 1 month.
Ealing, okay.
Like 40 years ago. I stayed there for 1 month. All I remember is that I had a small refrigerator that never kept anything cold, but then I realized it wasn't plugged in. But that's what I remember from my flat. But anyway, but I've come in and out. I come in there to do shows on Jack the Ripper, Cleopatra. What else have I been there for? I've come and gone, and they usually just don't let me stay very long. So I'm looking forward to I want to just come and stay for 2 or 3 or 4 weeks and really enjoy, get to know a little bit more. But you know as well as I do that my knowledge. Do you see the fly going by? It's like a fly in here.
Yeah.
We're on a small farm, so we have the horse, the donkeys, the llamas, the goats, and apparently in the summer the flies just, So they've been in my house, and I can't get rid of them. So now they're in the show. But anyway, you having lived in your country for so many years, and me not having done so, you have a much better viewpoint of how things work culturally, politically, in your country, and vice versa. Sometimes I get very frustrated when I see people from other countries telling me, oh, the U.S., blah, 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 blah. I'm like, you don't live here, and you don't know what you're talking about. You're only getting media stuff, and you do not understand what's happening here, and vice versa. I really don't understand what's happening there. So crimes also, it's very important when you're coming down to crimes and trying to understand them is there a cultural or political component that I, being an outsider, am totally unaware of? So if we don't allow people to honor us with information from their perspective, which might be the location they live, it might be their age, it might be their culture or a subculture, it could be their profession. There's all these things that you just don't know, because how would you know? You didn't experience it. So to me, it's like, I think I always tell this to detectives: when you're working on a case, be very open to what somebody else has to say. I remember a case I worked, and actually this case is going to court in September after 20 years. And I can't talk about it now. I've been a family request. I shut up until the case goes through. But one of the guys I said was the guy who committed the crime. They finally have charged him with it 20 years later. It took him a long time. But anyway, one of the issues was in this particular case was that the gentleman had, I hate to say the word gentleman. Let me take that back. I hate that word, and I'm using it because other people do. The suspect, because he's not a gentleman. If he was a gentleman, he wouldn't be killing people. A psychopathic killing suspect. Okay, anyway, took the person's vehicle and took it to a particular location, all right? And I went to that particular location, and what I didn't know was who hangs out in that location. I don't know the area, that specific spot. I went and talked to all the neighbors, all the people down the streets in that area. I got invited in for lemonade. It was great. They were super cool of it. And people were inviting me. And after a while, what happened was, like, the entire neighborhood came out. And they were like standing there, like there were like 20 or 45 of them, all giving their opinions on the neighborhood. Oh yeah, the drug dealer's down here, and this person would not come into this neighborhood. I'm sure it's this. And I'm like, this is great information because I don't live here. I don't know what's going on in this neighborhood. So I brought everybody in. And I remember when I went and said to the detective about what I determined, he's like, how did you get that information? And I said, I was nice. Because I didn't come in like, I'm a criminal profiler. I was like, hey, I don't know what I'm doing here. I don't understand what's going on in the neighborhood. Can you help me out? Can you be detectives for me? And they were like, everybody was like jumping on board. They were all having a good time, because I know where I lack knowledge. So we all have to know where we lack knowledge for all those different reasons. So, so sometimes somebody will come through and I'll almost be embarrassed. I'll like, never thought of that.
So what you're saying is that you didn't have any prejudgments. You weren't prejudgmental.
Of what?
You went in there with your ears open, of anything. You went in there, you kept your ears open, you listened, and you were able, and it worked to your benefit, obviously.
I think you're being too nice, Joe. No, as a profiler, I've already profiled the crime, and I believe there was reasons that guy was in the neighborhood. I had my suspicions, shall we say. I had my basic concept, but I allowed the people to be my devil's advocate because I was willing to say, I could be wrong. I'm making a guess here because I do lack knowledge. So yes, I was willing to be open. And the people then came forth with what they had to say about, and as it turned out, wasn't my favorite, but I wanted to also be sure that it was true what I was thinking, because I didn't want to think something wasn't true, and then somebody comes and tells me that isn't the way it works. So I'm like, ah, crap. I wanted to know that. So if you're good, I didn't mind being wrong. I would say that I didn't mind being wrong because I knew I had a lack of information, and not a total lack of information, mind you. I have actually done a lot of PI work in that and the vicinity thereof, and had a knowledge of the culture in general, the subculture in general. But I want to find out whether I'm right or wrong, and that somebody might just give me some piece of information. I'm like, dang, that I did not know. So yes, I think we should always respect other people who have more knowledge than us in a certain specific area. And it can be just almost anything. Even a 3-year-old might know something we do not know, about like what happens at the playground.
Yeah.
Why did that kid go off with that other person? As an adult, I don't get it. And that other kid's like, because the other person said such and such, and I would go. I'm like, oh. Oh. So, hey, while we're on that discussion, I have to go to the one you wanted to talk about today.
Yeah.
You know which one it is?
Oh, Rikki Neave?
Rikki Neave, yes. Okay, well, before we go to Rikki, I just gotta check what's happening here. This is good. Lisa N says, I was so mad when my partner said to me recently, it's a good thing they found the guy who kidnapped Madeleine McCann. So frustrating to realize what the average person thinks of the case. Okay, before we go to that, since we were on the Madeleine McCann thing, what do you think of our German suspect, Christian B?
No, wait, look, it's tabloid journalism. But
the German prosecutor says it's the guy.
Yeah.
Don't you believe him?
I've seen nothing in the way of proof that's been presented that makes me think it's him. Let's put it that way.
Very, very reasonable, and I agree with that. I haven't seen anything that the guy's a creep.
Would you say it? Let's put it this way. Would you say it's impossible that it's not him?
Wait a minute. It's impossible that it's not him.
It's extremely unlikely.
Okay, I would say, it's a kind of a funny thing because I always like to leave the possibility open that, for example, that a guy did get into the flat without leaving a shred of evidence, okay, and that the McCann's behavior was not, was abnormal, but just coincidental. And that I could go on like for 20 more things. and so what I have to do is say coincidental, lucky, coincidental. And at a certain point you go, I'm having trouble with this. So that's one aspect that I'm always willing to leave something open because you can have the freak thing, right? But it's less likely to be true, the freak thing, if there's like 20 things. If there's only 3 things, the freak thing is more possible. Get up 20, 30 things, the freak thing gets a little, reduced. And then as far as the evidence for Christian B, there just is, quite frankly, none outside of a few people saying he talked some crap and that he lived in the area. So if anybody's ever pulled up a predator list for their area, like one of those predator maps, you're like, I'm going to move. It's like, I just found 30 predators right around my house. There's a lot of creepy people out there and they do creepy things, but it doesn't mean they did that creepy thing. And that's the important thing, is that was in spite of anything he might have done, did he do that thing?
I mean, I just don't think it's him. I don't believe it's him. But when I've discussed this with people, like at work, they've said, well, it could be him. I say, well, it could be any number of people. It could be someone that we've never even heard of. It could, and you just, and I think this is why tabloid journalists, the media in general, find it very, very easy to tap into the masses who like a good tale, a good story.
Oh yeah, this mystery goes on. Yeah. And there could be. I say the same thing with the Panama Girls. That was what I was talking about in the last hangout. Here's all the evidence that supports that they just got lost, and there's a lot of it. I mean, we're not talking about a minor amount of it. There was a lot of evidence that nobody else was involved because of the length of time that they had access to their phones, that they were taking pictures of the camera at the last moments of after like 10 days and they're dying, that their backpack was found with the phones, a lot of money for the locals in the area, not to rip it off, and the camera too. It's like, what kind of kidnapper would that would occur over 10 days, that they would kidnap the girls, let them access their phones, take pictures, and then just not even take the money from the bag. Just no. This all the evidence points to it's something that just was a sad incident. But because of that, people go, but it could be.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're going to ignore all the evidence and then say it could be, and then the stories start, and that's a Christian B thing. All the evidence is over here, but then you say, well, it could be the guy was in the area. Well, yes, but are you ignoring all the other evidence about the crime? Well, yes, but he could have. He was on a telephone. Okay, he had a cell phone. Okay, but are you ignoring all the evidence? And it's frustrating because they do ignore the evidence, because that's the only way you can go over here, is to ignore all this evidence and pretend it does not even exist. And that's what was done with Operation Grange, which is why I think it's just bizarre in the sense that they started out the entire thing saying we have a remit that says this is an abduction and we're not looking at the McCanns. You've already decided to not look at any evidence and just go off and just find anybody you can find. And to me, there's a lot of reasons why people think that happened, which is where the conspiracy theories come in. But
this kind of picks up on the point you made a moment ago about cultural differences, because the McCanns they're both professionals, doctors.
Right.
They're both what in Britain we would call middle class, certainly from the professional class. And the class system in Britain, I mean, having lived in America, the class system in Britain means something very different to what it means in America. And I think the fact that they were these, white middle class professional people, both got spotless records, immediately there was a presumption, well, they couldn't have done anything. Surely they couldn't have done anything.
But for Scotland Yard? Scotland Yard?
Well,
why did they go with the No, Joe, here's what I don't understand. They could have, and this is something I am confused about. Maybe a UK perspective on this would be great. They could have. This is what I would have done. I would have said, because you don't. So stupid. Anyway, let's say I was working with Operation Grange, right? And I'm the spokesperson. I would come out and I would say this: we have been asked to evaluate this case, to reanalyze everything, and to do due diligence. We will start at the beginning of this case. We'll review all the evidence. Nothing is off the table. No one is not a suspect. And we will come back to you after we reviewed the evidence and give you our analysis of where we're going to go from there. And then a few months later, if you want to just chuck the evidence, right? You're trying to get away from it for whatever reasons, I would come back and say, we have reviewed the evidence and we're viewing this as an abduction. You'd be wrong, but okay, you could do that. Why would you start out with a remit that says don't even look at the evidence at all? And because I've worked on so many cases in the US, and when I walk in to the police department, sometimes they'll say, here's what we think. And I'm like, I don't want to know. I don't want to know what you think. Because why would you have me here? You want me to parrot what you think? It's pointless. Why? Just leave me in the room, and I tell them the order of the information I want. I start with just the crime scene photos, because that gives me the least amount of bias, right? Because just what's there. Then after I do the crime scene photos and make some determinations, then I say, bring me the police reports. After the police reports, then I go to the interviews of different people and so on and so forth, and other investigative stuff. But I start with the least bias I can get, because I don't want to just parrot. Why did Scotland Yard not start with the concept that we should start at the beginning and review all the evidence? Why did they start with a remit? So I'm curious what you think of that, Joe.
Okay, well, the short answer is I don't know, but I'm going to speculate.
That may be the best answer ever, Joe, because I don't know either, and I mean.
No, but let's speculate. Okay, let's just say that. Let's say that first of all, you can't rule out incompetence. Secondly, you have the media, which decided almost immediately that it was an abduction.
So pressure,
because I believe,
massive pressure.
so there was some media pressure, and the media, particularly the tabloid, we call them the red tops over here, the Rothermere and the Murdoch press, essentially, tabloid papers. They are very, very powerful, very powerful, and that was pressure upon Scotland Yard. Had Scotland Yard decided, well, the McCanns are suspects, if you're going to accuse parents of doing that to their child, you better have some solid evidence. And if, let's say, for example, they did put them in the dock and say, we're going to try you for X, Y, Z, then, if they don't win that case, my goodness, things are going to look terrible.
I actually agree with all of that, because people have said to me, why haven't the McCanns been arrested? And I say, because there isn't a strong enough case to go to court. There isn't. I have no problem with them not going to court with it at this point. I've said they need more evidence. So I don't have a problem with Scotland Yard choosing not to go forth with an arrest and prosecution, arrest and then allowing prosecution. My question is, why would they just not say, we're a law enforcement agency and we always start at the beginning, we're going to review all the evidence. Why did they have a remit that said they shouldn't review the evidence?
Again, I mean, I can't give you a comprehensive answer.
Isn't that strange? I mean, that's the strangest thing I've ever heard. Usually they do, if they're not going to do it, Joe, they just usually lie about it. You know what I mean? I've had police departments that lie like crazy about something because they know darn well who did it. And the whole family in the community is claiming that, oh no, this is somebody. And they're like, shh, they actually know who did it, but they can't admit it, right? So they go, well, we're reviewing everything. We're working on the case. I mean, they just give garbage out, but for a good reason, right? Because they have possibly to be. Yeah. So I get where, but in this particular case, it was so adamant that the remit was for an abduction. And I just thought it was the strangest thing I've ever heard. And I've always wondered what the reason for it was. I've never, like you, I don't know. And I don't know, I've never heard a good answer.
I emphasize, the fact that they are white, middle class, professional people. Now, I mean, I don't want to jump ahead here, but the Rikki Neave thing I wanted to talk about or mention at least. I mean, Rikki Neave's mother was put on the stand she was actually charged with his murder. She was found. Right. She actually served 7 years for neglect and for child abuse, but she was not found guilty of the murder of Rikki.
Right.
However, you're talking about a woman. By the way, Rikki Neave lives in the city that I currently live in.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to talking about this case with you. I really am, because this is a new one, and I just studied this afternoon. So,
yeah. But the thing is that Rikki Neave's mother was I don't know, she had some sort of drug issues, very, very working class.
She was a meth head.
Rough. Okay.
She was a meth head, and she lived like.
Say what you see, Pat.
Was it? No, but I mean, no. So I will disagree on one segment here, only because that if you're looking at issues as to why one particular set of parents gets less looked at than another set of parents, there's sometimes not just at the fact that they are a middle class or doctors or white or whatever they are, but just that what people go when the detectives too, same thing with John Benet Ramsey. This is a home which doesn't exhibit any kind of abuse or neglect in general. These are parents that are respected in the community. So generally speaking, the chances of really bad things happening to the kids are much, much lower than when you have a mother or a set of people in the home, or sometimes half the neighborhood in the home, that shouldn't be there, that behave in such a bad way that the chances of them harming the child is so much higher. And in the Neave's case, did I get the name right? Because I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Neave. Okay. In the Neave's case, mommy wasn't a very good mommy. And the household was a disaster. And the day before he disappeared, what did she do? Do you remember that?
I know that there was some sort of assault? I know she had drawn something on his forehead or
I don't remember that.
Liquid into
there
his
was something
mouth
about she kind of couldn't decide, I can't take care of this kid. She admitted that she was overhead, and it just was too much. So
Okay.
to have somebody who has issues taking care of a child, where I saw a bunch of photos. Oh, let's see what. Let me just jump here so I can show these people, because I did take some photos here. This is Rikki, cute little boy. How old? Let me pull up. Just so people know he was 6 years old. It says here, because it's the Daily Fail, but I do actually the Daily Fail. I have to admit.
Yeah, that's what you know.
I know, but you know what I have to admit about the Daily Fail, which, in case you know what we're talking about, it's the Daily Mail, is probably the most informative media outlet I actually access, even for U.S. crime cases. They're better than anything else, along with the National Enquirer, which in the U.S., which is considered the worst of rags. But my God, they had the best factual stuff in there, details.
Okay.
And I actually used to do the National Enquirer was one of the very few printed media that actually paid me for my work, which was shocking in that. But I had a guy that really liked me, and he would contact me for crime news. And do you know that I was never improperly edited? That actually was the fullest, most incredible. So anyway, I go to the Daily Mail because the Daily Mail actually has a tremendous amount of information, way more than any other group, including on U.S. cases. So I'm sitting in the U.S. going CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, New York Times. And I'm like, oh, hell with it. Let me go to the Daily Mail. And I go to the Daily Mail, and I'm like, the case is like 3 hours old, and the Daily Mail has everything. And I'm like, what the heck? How do their people come up with all this stuff? But anyway, so Rikki, it says here, the statement, of course, again, hyperbole is zero. So you understand when I say I get a lot of information from the Daily Mail, I'm not doing it because I'm oh my God, everything is true. Anyway, the boy who is doomed from birth. How tragic. Rikki Neave, 6, grew up with a wholly unfit, abusive mother who was put to trial for his murder, but cleared. As a man 40 is convicted of the crime nearly 30 years later after it took place. Now, let me just go further on this. Let me hold on a second. Casey, let me tell everybody what happened, because some people here have no idea about this crime, because we're in the U.S. or Canada or New Zealand. We're like, okay. Yeah. So anyway, this is what happened. So when abusive mother Ruth Neave was found not guilty of her son's murder in 1996, the question of who did it, who did kill little Rikki, would remain unanswered for more than 25 years. Unanswered in the public, but I'm wondering whether some others had pretty much a clue. Anyway, the 6-year-old who had been strangled was found naked and arranged in a star pose. And they put a little thing around the star pose, not even quotes, but this star pose, which is like, I'm going to guess, legs out, arms out. That's a tricky, by the way, I just want to point out here as a profile, that's a tricky thing to say, because there's two possibilities. One is you actually put them in that pose, and the other is you pick the person up and you chuck them on the ground and they go, So I'm not sure it's a posed crime, even though they claim it is. All right. Near his home in Peterborough. Sorry, I read that wrong. Peterborough. And you can always correct my mispronunciation. Go with that.
Carry on.
Is that right? No. So anyway, the day after. Was it Peterborough? Okay. Every time I do a show, I try to go over to YouTube and find somebody from the country to pronounce all the names correctly. So like Melbourne, which in the US we say Melbourne. If you go over to Australia, they go Melbourne. So Melbourne. Okay. Yeah. And I try to get the names correct, but then the problem sometimes is I get all that done, and then I start the show and I forget everything that I learned, and then I'm like, I'm going to say this wrong, and somebody's going to go, "You don't know how to pronounce the name." Okay, sorry. I'll get over it. How about you? Okay. So anyway, the 6-year-old strangled, put supposedly in the star pose, and naked, which naked is interesting. Near his home in Peterborough, the day after he was reported missing by his mother on November 28th, 1994. Today, 40-year-old James Watson, who was 13 at the time that Rikki disappeared, and here is this guy. That's him at the time, 13-year-old, and this is the one they now say killed the little boy, was today convicted at the Old Bailey of the child's murder 7 years after new evidence was found in a cold case review. The new evidence was DNA on this jacket. And there's a pretty funny story with this, which you might know and you might want to tell everybody. So anyway, Watson, who has pleaded not guilty to murder, was arrested after a sophisticated technology. I'm wondering what the sophisticated technology is. I'm assuming it's touch DNA at this point, because unless there was saliva on the jacket or semen on the jacket, which I don't believe there was, I'm going to guess they went with touch DNA, which is really questionable. Okay. But it wasn't available at the time, and it was a definitive match between his DNA and the samples taken from Rikki's clothing. All right, so they allege that he murdered Rikki before midday on November 28th, but defense witnesses claimed to have seen the child in the evening of the same day. That's why the mother sort of got mixed into this thing. So anyway, in his closing speech, Watson's lawyer, Jenny Dempster, had insisted there had been a wealth of evidence that Neave had murdered her son, while the prosecutor, John Price, told jurors that sightings of her on that day Rikki went missing showed she could not have done it. So anyway, jurors agreed that Price did, that Watson actually did murder Rikki. And then there was this theme about why was Ruth Neave, what happened with Ruth Neave, the mother. It said a constant theme in his trial was Ruth Neave's appalling mistreatment of her son, along with the shocking circumstances of abuse and neglect he grew up in. So she was considered a wholly unfit mother who used Rikki as a drug runner and a punch bag. And she admitted to child cruelty. On one occasion, Rikki was allegedly left screaming after being locked out of the house in his pajamas. In another, it was claimed Neave had held her son upside down on a bridge as he screamed. She had also grabbed the child around his throat, pushed him against the wall, and lifted him up to the point where his feet were about a foot above the ground. Let's see, what other things do they say about? Okay, at the time of his death, Rikki was living with his mother and two younger sisters. His older sister was aged 8 at the time of his death, was living in foster care. To me, that is a massive sign of problem in the house. If you have to take out one of the children, there's something going on here. Rikki's father, Trevor Harvey, had ended his relationship with Neave when his son was 3. The family were well known to local social services. So, social services was always involved in the lives because the family life was garbage. So that's what they all heard. Here's a weird thing. I'm going to get to that in a minute. That after Rikki was found dead, it emerged that his body was clean, as if it had been freshly bathed. That I do not understand at all. I don't know what the heck that even means. I mean, that's one of the strangest things about this case in the media. I'm like, what? So let's say mommy killed him, right?
Yeah.
Then what they're saying essentially is that she bathed him at home, then carried him out and tossed him on the ground into the start position, and then took his clothing and threw it in a bin. Possible, right? Mm-hmm. Because if she had abused him or she had drowned him or whatever, whatever. He wasn't drowned, by the way, he was strangled. So that you would bathe him really, I don't make sense. And this was one of the things that was held in this case as to why that he wasn't murdered by somebody else. Because what stranger would take his clothes off and bathe him in the middle of the woods? So I'm going to say that's probably just garbage. I'm going to say the kid was just not that dirty under the clothes. I don't even get that. That just makes no sense. But anyway, so just pointing this out. So mommy in this case wasn't Kate McCann. There wasn't a lovely home. There weren't happy children playing in pretty nice Christmas videos. You know what I mean? So I understand why people would have more sympathy for Kate McCann and Jerry McCann as being a decent family. A lot of people feel very sorry for Kate. I personally think she was a very pretty woman, very Madonna-like in her appearance. I always thought Jerry was a weasel, but hey, that's my opinion. He looks like a weasel and he acts like a weasel. But anyway, I don't know why anybody particularly liked him, but okay, somebody did. And but as a family portrait, they weren't bad. But when you get over to poor Rikki Neave, his home life sucked. His mother was, I say, a meth head. It was terrible. So I can understand why when he ends up dead, the first thing I think is, what did she do to him? And they went right after her because they've had so much problem with her that they're going to assume she did something. So I don't think that's a matter of just a status thing or a class thing. I think it's a matter of a horrible, horrible home life, that, and generally speaking, usually the reason they get killed is because of a horrible home life. So,
yeah.
So, in the Neave case, do you think that they were unfair toward her?
No, I never disputed that that she was an appalling mother, and I think that's been very well documented.
Yeah.
But just as one little caveat that I want to raise, and that is that I actually work and have done for some years with people who have addictions.
Okay.
They are, heroin addicts, crack addicts, alcoholics, you name it.
Right.
And I think there is a presumption that everyone who's connected to some kind of addiction is a bad parent. That is simply not the case.
I think that's I think that's at least a reasonable thing to point out. I like that.
Well, now the per capita, you're probably talking about more people with addiction problems being poorer parents than people who don't have them, because obviously addiction is a bad thing and it impacts on the family, etc., etc. But there are people who have suffered for many, many years and destroyed their lives and to some extent the lives of their parents, and but they would never ever touch their kids.
Right.
I know heroin addicts that have always put their kids first. I've worked with them every day. Over the last X amount of years, I've known hundreds of addicts, and they are essentially a cross reference group of people.
Right.
And some of them are very nice people, and some are not very nice people, and most are somewhere in the middle, like the rest of us.
Do you find, Joe, that the choice of drugs has an effect on how their behavior with the children, their attitude toward the children? As in other words, methamphetamine as opposed to heroin, as opposed to other opioids, as opposed to different kinds of things.
Actually, do you know what? Methamphetamine is virtually unheard of over here.
Really?
It's very, very. It's just not considered to be someone's favorite tipple. Heroin's a different thing. Crack is very common. Those two normally go together. In the case of, but I'll tell you something. At least 90% of the people who I've dealt with, who are heroin and or crack addicts, and this is certainly true with alcoholics as well, they say, I would never ever want my children to do this, even though they are setting the worst possible example and they're impacted badly. But when it comes to abusing your children or, God forbid, killing them, this is very, very rare. Now, don't get me wrong, social services are involved with, I would say, can't put a percentage of, maybe 40 or 50% of the people I work with. But to take someone's child off them, that's relatively rare. Wow. It's a minority. I can't say, maybe rare is the wrong word, but it's a minority. Now, don't get me wrong again. I'm not saying that Ruth Neave was anything other than a dreadful mother. She most certainly was.
No, Joe, it's interesting. She might have been a dreadful mother without the meth.
Oh, yes. Oh, well, you made my point for me. Absolutely, yeah, 100%. I just feel that had she, this is probably the wrong example to compare her to Kate McCann, but had she not had her issues with whatever drug she was taking, I think the fact that, and again, it's this weird class thing that none of us can ever define in England, but in Britain. But I think that they would have looked at her quicker than they looked at Kate McCann.
Well, that I agree with. I think in general there is and I don't think it has anything to do with the UK. I don't have to do with the US as far as class goes. I'm going to say class, status, caste is a worldwide issue. Except maybe I don't even think it. I think if you're in the Amazon with a tribe that hadn't discovered, they still have strata.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
we're the big people, you're the crappy people. So I think
Yeah.
that's human nature, and I think once somebody achieves a level of uh, status, they move up here. That the people who go to investigate them, they are also part of that system, no matter where it is in the world, and you have to be careful, just like the media and there's profilers. You're going in there and the person has a lovely home and they have good jobs. And you just can't go in there and say, did you kill your kid? Whereas you go into the Neave's house and you're like, you probably killed your kid because you don't suffer from the suspicion. If you have suspicions of them, people aren't going to question your suspicions in a case where
I mean,
really bad, like Summer Wells is in a case in the US
my,
right now. Summer Wells, I mean, the reason Summer goes missing and her family's a wreck. And and they've already taken all the other children into foster care. So the parents had drug problems, alcohol problems. The house was an absolute horror show. And the child, to go to the child's bedroom, you had to crawl underneath the kitchen counter to go down some stairs. I'm like, seriously? The kids are still playing video games and having some fun, right? They'd just gone swimming and so their whole home life wasn't terrible all the time, right? And there was some love going on there in spite of all the other issues. But when you come in there and look at them, you kind of go, the chances of this kid dying on this property is a lot higher than you would think a kid dying in Jean-Benet's house.
Yeah, sure.
That's just human nature and also statistics. Statistically, the Ramsey should not, should be a lot less likely to have killed their child than the Wells families. So,
yeah,
and yeah, police they're only working with what they know, and so I kind of get where they came from. But I want to point something out in this case, which is, along with sometimes with people who have homes that aren't the healthiest, they also have friends that aren't the healthiest and neighborhoods that aren't the healthiest, right? And if they're busy doing stuff like drugs, they don't have as much time to watch over and care for that child. So they're more likely to wander and get involved and not notice what's going on. So sometimes what happens is it's not that the family killed the child, but that something in the environment killed the child because the family wasn't really, in tune with what was going on. And there's so much crap around them. So in this case, I think that's what happened.
Let me give you something that's sort of connected to that. One of my clients, a guy I've worked with for a couple of years, was one of Rikki Neave's best friends.
Oh, okay.
He himself has had very serious, he's intravenous drug user, heroin, crack. So, I hear you. They come from that background, birds of a feather and so on. It's flock together, as they say. But yeah, I just, because this guy that I work with, he had to go to the Old Bailey to give evidence about the day Rikki went missing and whether, he didn't really want to talk too extensively about it, understandably so, but he had to talk about whether Rikki had any connection with, one of the guys that was mentioned was the guy who's been found guilty.
Right.
But I raised this case because I'm interested in your take on whether you feel that they have, after all this time, got the right man. What do you think the evidence suggests?
Okay. Okay. So the guy. This is the guy today. Looks like. Here's my picture of the guy today. Now, this was an interesting little article I found. Who did kill Rikki? Right. And
I'm not sprung this on you. I know that, but
no, where's that? Yeah, I'm trying to find it. Oh, I forgot to put the picture up. I hate when I do that. I thought I moved it over there, but it didn't put up. Oh, here he is. Hold on, let me find it. Here he is. This is the guy they suspect, and has been convicted, right? So anyway, this guy, um, uh, he he's a lifelong criminal. God, I mean, he's pretty much, I call do anything shit criminal. You know, it's like anything he can do, he does. Pretty much a crappy guy. And supposedly back in the day, he did show an interest in young boys and sexual things. He had all kinds of people claim to do all these perverted things. And so there's a lot of people making statements about him and his perverted mindset, shall we say. One of his, apparently sometime when he had a girlfriend, when he was, I guess, a teen, even though I supposedly liked boys better, he took her out to the woods and strangled her and did kill her, but, during sex. And there's all kinds of weird stuff about the guy. The guy was, he's freaky. But again, just like Christian B., just because you're freaky and we're in the area doesn't mean you done did it. But I do think the interesting point of this case is this. So supposedly they found DNA on that jacket. And now to me, I've talked about touch DNA before, which I believe this is probably what it was, because they're using just new techniques, which I'm going to say is very little DNA, so probably touch DNA. The problem is it's very easy to transfer touch DNA from one item to another item, especially if you're somehow you were near each other, right?
Yeah.
However, there was supposedly witness reports that the two of them, the little boy and the suspect who was now convicted, were together at that time. He was in the area, he knew the boy, and had skipped school that day and was around the child. And the most interesting thing they said about it was that when they told him that about the DNA, he made a claim that the reason the DNA was on the jacket was that he picked the child up. There was somebody doing some digging or something on the other side of some fence. And he lifted the child up so he could see what was happening. And he said, "Oh, the child's face, I thought it was fun." Okay. First of all, what the detectives found was that the fence hadn't been built at the time this happened. So consequently, there wasn't a fence that he could have done that. So his explanation for why his DNA was on the jacket was that he was lifting the child up. Now, does that prove he's guilty? Not really. Now, he's telling a story that isn't true. That's obvious, right? So, but why is he telling the story that isn't true? Is it because A, he's just lying because he has to come up with some reason why he's holding the kid, why his DNA is on the jacket? He's got to come up with some reason. And when somebody tells you, here's a problem that does happen in cases. Somebody tells me, we just found your DNA on such and such jacket. I'm like, well, I think we might have taken a ride to the store that day, and I might have gone, good job. Maybe that's how it got there. I can see somebody, even if they don't really think, if they don't know how it got there, they might fabricate something, especially if you're already a psychopathic criminal. Psychopathic criminals lie to get out of trouble, but they also lie themselves into trouble sometimes just because they lie a lot. So he could have just said, well, I don't know where the DNA is there, so I'll just make up this story. On the other hand, he might have known exactly why that DNA was there on that jacket, because he had touched that child on that day when he took the jacket off of the boy and disrobed the boy and killed the boy, strangled him, and left him there, and then threw the jacket away in the bin. And now he's making up a story for why his DNA was on the jacket. So it could be he's trying to get out of trouble, which he knows he's in. I would have to say that the totality of the evidence, as far as he was seen around the child, he had no alibi for that day, that his DNA was found on the jacket, that he did have apparently a lot of ideation, a lot of fantasy things about killing children, boys, sexual stuff. There was no sexual assault of the child. I don't know if I believe the Pose thing, because I just don't know that that's necessarily so. But the fact that he might get a thrill out of strangling the child and tossing him there naked is perfectly understandable. Stupid flag. If I compare that to the mother committing that crime in that way, I don't have a problem with the concept that she might have beaten her child, drowned her child. Strangulation is pretty unusual for a mother killing a child. And then making him naked and putting him out there. The story doesn't really work for the mother, and actually the time frame supposedly doesn't work for her either. So I would say, do they have the right guy? I think he's to me, he's the most likely guy to have committed the crime. I don't have a problem with that. In a court of law, if I were on the jury, would I believe there's enough? Here's what I can only say about that. I'm only reading some media reports. I have not been able to see the trial data and all the other information that would have been presented in court. I might hear all that and go, okay, this pretty much locks the guy in. Or I might just say, well, as weird as the dude is, and the fact that he was around the kid that day and touched his jacket, because he could have touched the kid's jacket and then walked away, and somebody else could have killed him. I don't know. So I don't know what else they have. Is he likely the guy? More so than Christian B, I can tell you that. This guy is he was only 13 years old at the time, but his ideation was very, very sick at that time, very perverted, very, very homicidal. So there's a lot of teen boys and teen girls who get some sick thrill out of the concept of killing. And a lot of times they pick a small child because they can manage a small child. So they do kill a smaller child. They would lure them into a woods or someplace like that, and then kill them in some fashion that gives them the cheap thrill. So do I have a problem with him being the guy that did it? No, not at all. Do I believe he did it? I don't have enough to say if I were on the jury, I would have convicted. But
let me ask you a question, though. If he is of that inclination, would he not have done it again over the preceding, 30 years or whatever it's been? 94 it took place, 28 years.
That is really hard to say. There's two problems in that. One is that he has committed a lot of crimes, a lot of stuff. He's done a lot of stuff, but has he actually done the same exact thing again? Apparently he has never been arrested for doing the same exact thing again. But I do believe there is a difference. Man, now the fly's landing on my head. Look at this. It's just driving me crazy. There's not food on the table. We also have cows, by the way. Not our cows. Right down the driveway, there's a guy. He's got cows for his children. There used to be a actual 30 or 40 cows out there, but that was the guy's mother, and then she sold all the cows off and moved away. But then his children missed the cows grandma had, so he got a couple cows for his children. And apparently now there are 12 cows, I think, and they're multiplying, and the children won't let him do anything to the cows and the bull. So they're there, and they also seem to be getting out. So sometimes you find them standing on your lawn and not in his pasture. But anyway, because of all the animals, yes, just 700 flies in here all of a sudden, and they love the lights, so.
Yeah.
It's summer. Anyway, the tricky part about that is two things. One is that as a teenager, his excitement over the possibility of killing a child, to understand that he could commit homicide, that he could be someone who can cause death. Teenagers have some really, interesting brains sometimes. And they do that because it thrills them. We've seen teenage girls stabbed. I remember there's a Slender Man case in the United States. This teenage girl lured a younger girl out to the woods and just stabbed her repeatedly. Would she have done it again? I don't know. She might have done other stuff, but not necessarily that. It's not quite the same thing as a serial killer who commits sexual homicides at a certain age where that's what he's going to do forever on if he can. Sometimes it's more of I want to experience something that is a no-no, something that is beyond the pale, something that nobody can believe I could do, something I can get away with. So sometimes, yes, I believe that a teenager might commit a crime that they won't repeat in the exact way again in their life. They may do other horrifying, crappy things, but not that thing. The other possibility is that he has done other things similar. They just haven't caught him, you know. So there could be a couple outstanding crimes that he's committed. It could be a dozen of them that he's committed, and nobody knows he did them. There's with the case I'm going. One of the cases I'm going to be talking about. I just had a production company call me. I actually worked on this case, and I'm not going to mention this particular case yet. But a woman was murdered, and familial DNA was what caught the guy, and it's been 30 years. Now the question is, he was a married man, had children, had a job, and he's like, I didn't do this, And then the question is, what did he do for the last 30 years? Because the crime that they claim he committed and was convicted for, by the way, was an incredibly sadistic, horrible sexual homicide. And I personally believe that's not the only one the dude did. But has he ever been connected to any others at this point? No. So, is he the wrong guy, or has he just not been connected? So I don't know with this particular suspect, is it just that the teenage part of him decided he wanted this experience, and then he went on to doing just other stuff? Or is he just not been caught for other stuff? So the one thing we can't do is say somebody didn't commit a crime because he hasn't done something similar since that we know of. And so therefore he couldn't possibly have done it. But all I can say, Joe, is I don't have the level of information that if I were on hopefully a professional jury and not a civilian jury, if I were hired as a professional juror to do that as my work, that I would get the information on this case and I would say, looks like the guy could have done it, but I just don't see the evidence is solid enough to convict. Or I would have said, definitely him, definitely enough, even, with the DNA and the other circumstances and everything else, there's enough to convict the guy. So I'm not really sure. What do you think, Joe? Because I know you're questioning me, so I think you have some questions about the case. So what is it that kind of irks you about this case?
No, not really. It never really rang true that the mother killed him. I never believed that. With this guy, and again, this is actually quite a recent conviction.
Correct.
So, I mean, I haven't really made my mind up entirely. I think it probably leans towards him, but is there enough evidence to convict him? I don't know. I don't know.
And maybe both of us will have to see if we can find, because I say it's just the media reports are just not substantial enough. But the question would be, sometimes people ask us, if it wasn't the mom and it was not him, who else had access to him that day that would commit that kind of a crime? And he wasn't raped. It's true, he was not raped. So there wasn't a clear sexual assault on him, but that doesn't mean there wasn't a sexual component because he was naked. But then again, interesting enough, people talk. I mean, this guy has obviously a weird history of sexual stuff as well, right? But let's say not always because somebody is made naked is it a sexual crime. It could just be fun. Look at you! I took all your clothes. Ha ha! It can't be that, and it's not even sexual. So we have to be careful about drawing conclusions on things that we just don't know. It could be likely, but we just don't know. So obviously the DNA was what did this guy in, and the DNA and his history and the fact that they actually did talk to him back in the day. So it wasn't like they popped out of nowhere. The guy actually was there around the kid, knew the kid.
Yeah.
So it's not like the DNA just happened to match some young man, some 40-year-old man who, was a professor of theology at, some college, halfway across of England. You know what I'm saying? So it would be really,
My client, who was one of Ricky's friends, said that this guy, he knew him as well. The guy was, they were on an estate called Welland Estate. Right. Estates over here are kind of like the projects in America. It's.
Is that what they're called? They're called estates. Yeah, that's lovely.
Yeah, well,
We
thank
call
you.
them
But,
things like gardens, like the Washington Gardens. There's no
yeah,
gardens.
yeah, yeah, yeah. My ex-wife always makes fun of this sort of English proliferation. Is that what's the word I'm looking for? This English habit, let's put it that way, of giving quaint names to very horrible things. But the estate over here was it's called Welland Estate, and even now, 28 years later, it's a horrendous place to live. It's considered to be a very rough area. And the guy that I know, who was Ricky's friend, said that this guy was well known, but he wasn't the only one. He wasn't the only rough and tumble guy on that estate. It was
Good point.
There's a lot of them around.
That's what I'm talking about. The problem with the vicinity is that if you live someplace and pretty much around you, everybody's pretty stable, you got less of a suspect list. But then sometimes you're like, oh, let me throw this rock. Oh yeah, him. You're like, yeah. There's so many. So this guy could have touched the kid's jacket, but then some other creepy dude in the area skipping school that day could have done it. You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah, I like to think they've got the right guy, but
I think they do, but I just don't. I think they do have the right guy. Personally, I think they've got the right guy. Whether I say that I would have convicted him in a court of law, I would have to see I'd have to see the entire case and what they had, because this is again what's so difficult, and why I always say over and over again, this is an educational channel, because people. Let's say I'm talking about a case. And I'm explaining what the evidence points to, blah, blah, blah. And somebody goes, well, that's not, you could be wrong. I'm like, yeah, it could be, because this is an educational channel. This isn't a court of law. And I'm doing videos based on what I know and what I can know in a relatively short period of time. So yes, I looked up this case because you mentioned it to me. And I think at the time you told me that it was probably 3 a.m. U.S. time. Because wasn't maybe you mentioned it before, but I hadn't looked at it. But anyway, then you said, well, we could do this for this case, right? And so anyway, somewhere at 3 o'clock in the morning, when I wake up anyway, and like, oh, time to go to the bathroom, I'm like, I always check my email. I'm like, oh, okay, he can do the show, and then I'm like, okay, I better look up this guy. So we're talking about 3 a.m. research, and I'm like, I do not have 1 million subscribers on YouTube. I am not being paid very well. I'm lucky if I can cover the cost of the show. I'm not even get paid. I don't even make minimum wage, which is why I say, please support the show and join Patreon, because I can make a whole lot more money not doing the show. But I want to do the show, but because I'm not being paid, there's levels of things you do. So if you're doing a YouTube show, I try to do enough I've seen people do less than me, where all they do is read like 2 paragraphs of Wikipedia and they got an opinion. I try to do more than that. And sometimes I watch 2 documentaries, look up appeal processes, enough to try to come up with some good conclusions when I do my real shows on the cases. But if I were being paid by, let's say, a media company, I'm going to do it, whatever, I might spend 2 to 3 times as much time, because I'm going to be doing a show on television. If you're going to hire me by the police department or prosecution defense, I'm going to do, you're going to pay me by the hour. I can put a lot more energy into it. I will be happy to spend 50 hours, looking through crap. But I'm not going to do 50 hours of research for a YouTube show that I can barely pay the bills on, I'm not an idiot, So I always tell people, my point of my show is to prove something. My point of my show is to educate and to help people, think through things, understand how the process works, but not necessarily to come up with an absolute on something, which I don't have time to spend 1,000 hours to prove. So, So I think with Neave, I think most likely that is the guy. I mean, things do definitely point to him as opposed to anybody else. I don't think the mother killed the kid. I don't. I think she was not a great mother, but I do not think she killed him, because nothing really matches her with that. The time frame, the way he was found, I don't see anything in that. But I see a lot matching the guy that has been convicted. I just don't know whether they had sufficient evidence to convict him properly, or whether in 3 years this will be an unsafe conviction, and then we'll have a big argument over it. He'll get a defense team. Everybody's supporting him, you know.
I'd really love to know, you know, more details about the guy's criminal record, you know, now that he's 40. Because although I still think that there's still like an alarm bell goes off in my head when I think that, and yes, I take your point that he may not have been caught, but normally someone who commits that crime they may not do the exact same crime, but if they have that element of sadism, it's going to bubble to the surface at some point.
Could be in private relationships, or it could be he just hasn't been caught. But I think you're right. I think I would like to know myself more about that. It's a kind of a Christian B situation in a sense that was Christian B really the kind of person that would kidnap a little girl and kill her?
Yeah. And
I don't see evidence of that. And of course, now the German prosecutor said, "Oh, well, you know, he kidnapped her for some sex ring." I said, "He did not." You know, that's just nonsense. But Christian B. He's obviously I mean, those two probably know each other and hang out.
Prison.
Yeah, if I'm in a bar and both of those guys want to buy me drinks, I hope, Joe, you'll show up and help me out there. Because I really don't want to hang out with either one of them. They're both skeezy dudes. But sometimes when they commit so many kinds of so many creepy kinds of crimes, and they're also sometimes they can be in environments that they don't get reported a lot. That's a real problem. It doesn't mean it could have cozied up to somebody and abused their child. It doesn't mean it couldn't have lured some kid into some sexual thing and been sadistic, and the kid's just never going to admit it, because maybe he's not into 6-year-olds anymore, but maybe a nice 14-year-old will do for him. A 14-year-old on drugs, let's go off here, and then he does something toward the 14-year-old. And the 14-year-old's just not going to go admit that, hey, that guy tied me up and put me in a closet, just not going to talk about it. Or that he was, there's a case of, I can't remember, serial killer in the United States. I just did a show on him, but I've forgotten. One of the things about him was that he had, it was kind of like Jeffrey. Remember Jeffrey Dahmer in the U.S.? He had that one kid who ran out of his house naked. And nothing ever came of it. It's like, here's a guy who's been, killing people in his house and eating them, and this naked kid goes running down the street, and they're like, whatever. It's a weird neighborhood. People are strange, And in this other case, very similar thing happened. This particular serial killer had lured some teenage boy into his place and had tried to kill him, and he had escaped. And he went and tried to tell, the police. I don't think he went to the police because I think he was afraid of the police. I think he told people this guy tried to kill me. And then it was just, I forgot the whole thing. But anyway, the police may have been involved, but they just let it go, right? So sometimes it isn't that he hasn't done things. It just may not be reported things. It may be things that were done that he could get away with. Or it may be that he's committed crimes that nobody has a clue about for 30 years, and then when they find out who he is and he did certain things, they then link him to 20 other crimes. Yeah, and we just don't know it yet. So, when was he convicted?
A month ago, 2 months, 6 weeks maybe.
It's really? Oh, is that recent? Okay, wait a minute.
Oh, I think so. Yeah.
Let's say
maybe it's a little longer.
Okay. The Daily Mail came out with this in April 2022. So yeah, you're pretty much right. 6 weeks about. I mean, it'll be interesting to see whether they come up with other stuff this character has done over the years. It's definitely a psychopathic criminal. I have no question about that. But it just depends how he expresses himself or what he feels a need for. And people ask me about that with serial killers. It's like, well, how often do they kill? It's never, every month by the moon. Sometimes it's years in between. And some do stop and some do change. There was one killer, I'm going to do a show on him one day. He had like 10 different MOs. Guy couldn't stay with one. It was like one person he hit over the head with an axe, another person he shot, then another person he strangled, then he jumped them in the street, and then he lured them into his house. I mean, the guy had like So ridiculous. I mean, he had so many different MOs. And that's why they never connected him, because nothing ever matched, right? When they finally got him, they found out, he had done like, 10 or 12 homicides. But what was interesting about the guy was that he stopped killing. He started with assaults. Then he went to rapes. Then he went to sexual homicides. And then he stopped killing. And he went back to just raping. And I put quotes around the just part, by the way. So I don't get just raping. And so it was, they're like, why did he do that? Why did he stop killing? Is it because he just got bored of doing it? Is it because he got worried that, there was too much physical evidence, that he was tired of hiding bodies? I haven't looked at the case in years. I'm going to have to review that one, because one of my favorite cases of all time, because of how his MO changed constantly, and he just never got linked together because how he was so changed up so much. But he went back to raping. So this guy could have killed once and decided, well, I almost got in trouble for that, so I'm just not going to kill anybody. I'll just sexually assault them. I don't know.
But that's extremely rare, though, isn't it? I mean, was he? Maybe he was. Well, I don't know. I'm just.
How rare? What do you mean by rare?
Well, what, for someone to change their MO that frequently?
Here's an interesting problem, Joe. Do you know for a long time all serial killers were white? How did that change?
Oh, how did that change? I don't know. There you go.
Okay.
I'm saying those words again.
All right. The FBI. What happened was, generally speaking, that when white girls got killed in the long past, right? White women got sexually assaulted and murdered. There was a better police investigation in that particular instance. And also because at one point in time, the races were quite separate in their actual living circumstances. You had a black neighborhood, you had a white neighborhood, a Hispanic neighborhood, whatever. And so what happens? A white girl gets killed, probably white guy killed her, because he lived near her, right? So if you were in the Polish area of Baltimore, probably white guy killed Polish-looking girl. That's the way it worked. And in some of the black neighborhoods, because of the circumstances over the years, and I don't do politics on this channel, but there was a heavier proportion of African Americans living in inner city, which had a higher rate of crime due to poverty. So when you're working in an area, and I live in Prince George's County, Maryland, and we have the richest black community in the United States, and we've also got some really crappy poor communities, right? And in the poor communities, I guarantee you, the rate of homicide is so high, and the rate of crime is so high, that the police are overwhelmed. So, and a lot of times, like, I don't know, So, and then you can get confused. So, if you're in a let's say a particularly white neighborhood, middle class, girls walking home from school, she gets murdered. Then you say, oh, look, white guy killed girl walking home from school. You get a black girl in a poor neighborhood walking home from school. They say, well, she bought the wrong drugs from the wrong guy, And maybe she did buy drugs in the past from the wrong guy, So they're like, they don't even know what that they're just like, oh, it could just be whatever, by boyfriend. And so you could go on with, whether there's a, cultural, just a misunderstanding of culture, whether it was just dismissing of the seriousness of the matters, or whatever. But the problem was there was a better investigation in white neighborhoods, and the white women who were being killed usually by white people because they lived in the same neighborhoods. So when the FBI started interviewing the killers in prison, they started interviewing Ted Bundy's, you know what I mean? They got white guy after white guy after white guy. And somebody's, the FBI put out this crap. The serial killers are mostly white guys, which was total garbage. So what happened was eventually started finding out that, in certain black neighborhoods where 100% African-American and girls were getting murdered, guess what? There's an African-American serial killer there. And they finally found that out. And then an interesting thing happened. Over time, when there was more mixing of the races as far as where people lived, suddenly white guys were killing black women black guys are killing white women because they're only killing who's in the neighborhood. They're lazy. And they're not even racist. They're just like, I'm going to get whoever is coming down the trail next. Oh, look, let's say it's a white guy on the trail. Oh, here comes a white woman. I'm going to kill her. Oh, dang it. Somebody just popped out. I don't have time to do that. Oh, look, here comes a black woman. I'll kill her. Didn't care. He just wanted to kill somebody. So
you've heard of Peter Sutcliffe, I'm sure, the Yorkshire.
Right.
I mean, we're going back to, the 80s. So his victims, I think it was 13 women he killed.
Okay.
They were white, black, short, fat, thin, tall, you name it. He didn't care.
Yeah. Availability is really important.
I'm kind of surprised the FBI had that view, that rather parochial view.
Right.
But
a lot of that was just a mix-up, and so some of it's just not understanding how things work. So the same thing is true with serial killers and how often they kill. And there was this concept that, once a serial killer started, he couldn't stop, so he was going to kill every month in the full moon. And so he had to kill. It's like most of those guys, that's not true. They kill when their lives go out of control. So they might kill somebody, and then they find a girlfriend, they get a job, and they hang in there for 2 or 3 years, and then things go to hell, and then they screw it, so they go kill somebody. Or they may go on a spree. Some go on a spree and kill like every night. But the problem is that sometimes things don't turn out the way that's statistically done. And because of that, we just don't know it. So let's say there's a lot of guys who killed somebody in the teenage years and then didn't kill that way again. It's hard to prove a negative, right? So you don't know, you don't have the evidence, so you say it didn't happen, but it doesn't mean it didn't happen. So it gets very tricky. So I think there's a lot more things that we don't know by all the killers that got away. You think, we interview serial killers. Well, they're the ones that screwed up. What about the guys who didn't screw up?
Yeah. Very good.
They got away with it. Let me just check. I want to see what, my goodness, I'll check some of these. Okay, let me look back here. Annika says, hi. Don't killers use their neighborhood more than race? Yes, they do. You usually want to kill, first of all, abducting people, killing people. You want to be comfortable with the location. You want an opportunity when you can do it when nobody sees you. And if you kill somebody, you want to be able to dump their bodies or if you're going to kill them right at the spot, you just got to know nobody's going to jump out. So you kind of want to know what's going on in your neighborhood. And if you go to somebody else's neighborhood, you're much more likely to be noticed. And you have to worry about everything that you just don't understand yourself. So you usually do it where you're comfortable. So that is absolutely true. Now here's an interesting point. Maybe DNA science evolved scaring them away. Well, no, the DNA wasn't there back in the day when what's his name again? Sorry. What's his name? Sorry.
Who?
The one we were
Rikki
talking
Neave's
about. The name's what?
James Watson.
Yeah, James Watson. When Rikki was killed, DNA wasn't so big back then. So I don't think that would not be probably the issue. I'm going to go back up here now. If I get through the flies. God bless. So annoying. Robin had to run off. Oh, wow. You have a great Independence Day weekend. Robin, you're allowed to have a life outside of YouTube. Good for you. Well, let me see what Lisa says. It is very unlikely him based upon evidence. Oh, where is the evidence? I'm not sure what crime you're talking about. You have to get back to me on that, Lisa, because I'm not sure what you're talking about. Yeah, and this is true, Anne. Robert Picton, a Canadian pig farmer, who became a serial killer after murdering over 20 women. No, he became a serial killer the first woman he killed. And then he just kept killing. And luckily for him, he had pigs, and apparently they're really good at eating people. So very useful animals. So what a great deal he had to have pigs, I only had one pig in my life, and my pig Gwendolyn, who was my lovely pig for 20 years, but she never ate anybody, and I didn't have anybody I wanted to get rid of.
I can give you a list.
Now Doreen says, Jane Velez couldn't get through a show without talking about being an ex-alcoholic. Well, she did have a bent for that because she's a recovering alcoholic, and she she was very big on, and she loves animals. So those are two things that were big for Jane Velez Mitchell. Luca Magnotta. I'm going to do a thing, and there's a Canadian case for you. And I'm going to do that case, Luca Magnotta. I actually did talk about him quite a bit on Canadian TV, and I did watch the video of him dismembering that guy. He killed and dismembered and fed to his, I think he didn't really feed it, but I think was it a rabbit or was it a dog that he let it, have a little bit of dinner? Can't remember. But anyway, very unpleasant video that I did watch. I forgot how I found it, but I did watch it, and then I spoke on it because I had actually seen the actual video. So I'm going to do a show on that, a full show, because there was that group about the cats. Can't remember. And so they supposedly found Luca Magnotta. I can't remember who was actually correct about all of this and how it all went down, but yeah, he was one sick cookie. I'm going to do a whole show on him and the group on the internet that supposedly helped identify him. So I'm going to do a show on that because it is really, it's a creepy one. Yeah, that's a good creepy Canadian one. What modications? That sounds like a song. That's right. Do the modication. Okay, Lisa says, I'm interested in modications. That's where that came from. She's interested in modications and exploring how I can catch the killer. That's a great word, actually. That's true. Motivations and locomotion, right? So the motive that makes you do things. Modications. I like it. That's true. As far as what you're pointing out, how we can catch killers, motivations is always the same. I go over this over and over again. It's power and control. Serial killers are not different from the rest of us human beings. We like power and control. If you're a healthy human being, you find healthy ways to get power and control in your life. If you're an unhealthy human being, going up on the narcissism scale, you find unhealthy ways to get power and control. And you start manipulating people and abusing people. When you get to psychopathy, it just really, people are either useful or in the way. So, and you take advantage of them one way or the other. And how to stop them is tricky because, generally speaking, there's a number of ways to stop serial homicides. One is to have a healthier home life so that people don't become violent psychopaths. Secondly, that we have enough of a community that is paying attention so that it's harder to commit these things. Thirdly, to have proper law enforcement and law enforcement understands how serial killers work and does better serial homicide investigations so we can stop them early on so they don't carry on for 30 years. And then we go, oh, we got the guy with some familiar DNA. He's 87 years old and he'll be spending the rest of his life in prison. And you're like, really? So he's killed 40 women and been married 3 times and had sex every day of his life. And now he's going to suffer at 87 years old by going to prison. Sure. Thanks. Not a successful, that's not what you call success. That's called failure. Let me see if there's anything else back here. What do you think about this? This is always a question, Joe, that everybody asks. Florence says, how many, if any of the top is 9, do you think are aware of what actually happened?
I think they have their suspicions, especially Jerry's little mate. What was his name? One of them. The name.
Like Jane with her fake story.
No. There was. Jerry was outside the flat, but wasn't he talking to?
Jez.
Jez, yes, thank you, yes.
Jez wasn't one of the Tapas 9. I mean, he just was a dude.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Jez, I think Jez was just there. I think it appears to me that Jerry came out, and I believe he had already discovered what had happened. That's what the evidence appears to support. And then he was going to do something, and he ran into Jez, and he had no much choice but to, hey, how you doing, dude? And this is one Jane claims that she came trotting out of So I'm going to go back to the flat now, and she comes trotting down that street past Jez and Jerry, and she says that they did not see her as she passed by. She saw supposedly this guy carrying a child away across the street that Jez and Jerry were standing on. She saw the guy, but Jazz and Jerry neither saw Jane nor did they see the guy. So I don't know. What were they doing? Lying on their faces in the street, so they couldn't see anything? Because I've been on that street. I went to Praia de Luz. I stood on that street. It's very narrow, very narrow, very quiet at that time of night. Very quiet.
But I also think that if they knew, if one of the Tapas Nine knew that the McCanns had somehow drugged their children or given them something, if any of them knew that, they must have then questioned, well, did Madeleine meet some sort of end because of that? The thought must have crossed their mind. I think they must have had their suspicions. Yeah, but obviously they're not.
I personally think there are 2 or 3 who kind of knew what happened. I think the others did not, but had their friends back, because they'd known these. You have to understand. When these are your friends. These are people you hang out with every day, and something horrific happens, and first of all, your heart goes out to them, regardless of how it occurred. And then you may have suspicions. You may even think it's possible, but then you think again, just like the general public. I can't. How can I think that of my friend? I'm sure it really did. I think the child really must have been abducted. I don't want to say anything that's just wrong. So I think a good portion of them. I don't believe that this is a conspiracy of every single person, and I think that's ludicrous. I think that a good portion of them really didn't know what was going on and are confused, and also drinking. I don't know how much they were drinking, but if you're drinking a bit, you just you're relaxed mode, shall we say? You're not really taking in everything, and you're having just a fun time, and you don't know what happens to all of a sudden. Kate's going, "Oh my God, Madeleine's been taken." You don't remember every detail, and they're not going to jump forward and try to offer information you're not sure is correct. I believe absolutely Jane Tanner. Her story is not supportable by reality. So I believe Jane Tanner knows something. And the fact that Jane Tanner supposedly then told Kate a ways after, not the night it happened, not when they found Madeleine missing, instead of saying, which just absolutely boggles the mind. So here you are, your friend just says, my child's been taken, and you saw some guy taking a child away, but you don't bother to tell her until, the child has enough time to be killed. And she tells Kate this way later, and Kate supposedly goes, "Oh, I forgive you." I'm not forgiving my friend. I would not forgive her for 1 minute of my life. You didn't tell me. You saw some guy taking a child away, looked like my kid, and you didn't tell me. I hate you forever. I will hate you. And yet Kate forgave her. So I'm pretty sure that was a fabricated story as far as the evidence supports. So I believe she knows something, and I do think there's a couple others that know something and help their friends out. And I think the others probably didn't really know and, just don't want to go there, shall we say. Don't want to go there. Oh, here's one from Lisa N. What do you think of this? Harold Shipman. Yes, that's true. And Fred West. Yep, and the Yorkshire Killer. All boring serial killers, though. I think the problem...
Shipman, am I right in saying, holds the world record for people killed?
Was he the doctor? Or something? Is he the doctor?
Yeah, the doctor. He was. He'd already been struck off once as a doctor, and I think he started his own practice again,
right?
And ended up killing. I mean, they're never going to know how many people, but it was all elderly people,
right?
And he was eventually caught because he was altering documents on his computer and didn't realize that there is I forget the exact term. You know me and technology, Pat. That somehow there is a hard drive that can actually record the actual day that you produce those documents.
This is true.
So that's how he got caught.
Oh, yeah. I've forgotten the whole history of him, but usually, when you have anesthesiologists, doctors, and nurses who kill off elderly people, they get away with it quite well for quite a long time, if maybe they never get caught at all. Because, first of all, the expectation is that person is going to die anyway. So They're not. It's not.
Yeah.
A lot of times autopsies aren't done. If you're working with the police, a detective, they've got an unattended home death. Now, if you have an unattended home death of a 20-year-old, there's unquestionably going to be an investigation and at least an autopsy. But you get an unattended death of a 95-year-old, they're just like, yeah, whatever.
Although having said that, the figures for the amount of fatalities at Shipman's surgery were through the roof, and no one really paid attention until some relatives started to say, well, actually, my Auntie Beryl or whoever she was 87, but she was absolutely fine, and suddenly she's dead. Right. What's happened?
Yeah, but generally speaking, that's the problem, is that because they are elderly, there's an assumption by the family included that they probably just died naturally, and so that's just, and because there's a doctor too, I know when I talk to people about, I used to work as a medical sign language interpreter in the hospitals, and I saw things going on, people, doctors making diagnoses, and I'm like, you're so wrong, and I would think to myself, that's not right, and then later on I'd know exactly what the person's problem was, and then later on, after all testing is done, it'll come back, I was right. And I'm like, really? Okay. But the person, meanwhile, was totally confident that the doctor was correct. And so, again, doctors out there, many of you are wonderful doctors. However, there is a godlike belief in doctors by their patients. And one of the problems being that people will say things, for example, well, before you start on your exercise program, you should visit your doctor. So that, like, the doctor is somehow, is my father or my mother, or the boss of my life, and I'm supposed to visit them and before I do anything, they should tell me whether I should or shouldn't do that. And so there's this, the doctor-patient thing is where the patient is supposed to be totally confident in what the doctor says. What does your doctor say? Well, a lot of times the doctor says stuff that isn't true, So I do my own research, and of course, you're one of those Google people. You're a Google doctor, I'm like, okay, I can do research and understand and learn, go through all kinds of scientific reports and come up with conclusions that are reasonable. So, and I might want to refer to a doctor. Let's say go to a doctor to get certain testing done, but that doesn't mean I'm going to believe them hook, line, and sinker. And I want to hire a doctor I want to hire the doctor. Like, how you hire people to do other things? Like you hire a lawyer, right? The lawyer you don't go, well, it's your lawyer. You hire the lawyer to analyze stuff. Well, I want to hire a doctor to analyze stuff, but I don't want to be their patient, where I'm supposed to look up to them as if they know everything. But this is the way it's always been presented. You're almost a child to that parental figure. So families go along with this without question. If this person's a doctor, they just go for it.
But there have been other examples. I don't know whether you've heard of Beverly Allett, who was a nurse in Britain, and she killed babies. She killed 12, 13 babies, 14 maybe. Nice. And again, a nurse, you don't expect that from a nurse. We're sort of reverent of nurses, and
And nurses are the number one profession of Munchausen syndrome by proxy, ladies.
Yeah.
Munchausen syndrome by proxy, by the way, is not a psychological diagnosis, even though some think it is. It is a behavior. Simply meaning that's a person who is a psychopath who kills people in their care, or hurts people in their care, or claims people in their care are sick so they can get attention. So nurses, somehow, that's a very popular profession for women who exhibit Munchausen syndrome by proxy, is nursing. Likewise, with male serial killers, number one profession is security guard. So that's about power and control in the male sense, and for the female, it's like, I help people die. I help people, And then again, you don't want to. This person seems so sweet and nice, and they're caring for your baby. They wouldn't consider. You can't believe they'd kill your baby. I mean, how could they do that? She said, nurse. So I think that's why they get away with it for so long. And the other reason is because they work for a medical establishment who doesn't want to get a massive lawsuit. So what happens is oftentimes they manage to move them on, like somehow, fire them. And then they go to another institution and commit the crimes there. Then they go to another hospital and do it again. And so sometimes they're not even caught to the fourth or fifth hospital. When they go, how come this woman has been in 5 different hospitals and every ward she's on has dead babies on her watch? Then they get suspicious, It's like,
I think that happened with Shipman. I said he was struck off initially. Perhaps he wasn't. Perhaps they just kept moving him on. I'll have to look up again.
I have to check into Shipman. I'm going to do a whole series on serial killers at some point. But each one of them I'm going to do is not going to be about their history. It's going to be about what was fascinating about them. The most important point that we need to know about that particular serial killer or the investigation, how the police work was done, how they could have been caught, something unique about them. Not just that, let's talk about the people that killed. Yeah. But Shipman was definitely, that's interesting. Okay. Doreen said Lizzie Borden is a good one. Lizzie Borden took an action. That's, I don't know that many people pay attention to, again, Lizzie Borden as far as one of the big cases in the U.S., but it's, it made such a great little poem that I think people remember that one. Yeah. I was going to point this one. Oh, that's Lisa N says Mark Lundy was the other, and okay, I forgot Mark. Now what? Well, see, I can't remember what I even do. Mark Lundy. What did I? Okay, which guy was he? Yeah, well, I did with Mark Lundy. Now I can't remember what it was. I have to Google my own case that I worked on. Let's see, what was that? That one, the Lundy murders. Christine Lundy. Oh, that was a fascinating case. That is one of the most interesting cases ever. That was the case, the Lundy case, where he was supposedly left his wife and daughter at home, went off to do some business in another town, and then he came back and found the police were around his house and they had been murdered. That is a fascinating case. That's one of the most interesting cases ever. I'll go with the Lundy one as being a great New Zealand case. Absolutely, that was really interesting. Trying to see if there's anything else. I believe people said here, motivations. I still love that word. That's really good.
I thought it was a soul band in the 60s.
It sounds like it, doesn't it? We'll do the motivations. Christine says not all doctors are equal. They do not all have the same diagnosis to things. And Pat, it's worth to do research you're not comfortable with. Yeah, and that's why you're supposed to get a second opinion. Doctors are like any other professional, including profilers. We have knowledge, we have experience, we have, and then we will do an analysis based on what we come up with. But not all, like any profession, you got really great doctors, so-so doctors, really crappy doctors, great profilers, so-so. I mean, great teachers, terrible teachers. People are human, and so we all have different levels of ability, and also different levels of ability in different areas. So a doctor could be really good at this, but not so good at that. Teacher great at this, but not so great at that. So I think just made lots of noise on my here. So yeah, but I think it's always worthwhile to understand when you're learning something or trying to understand something, you have to be a little bit willing to not accept something at face value, to learn a little bit more, or to get that second opinion. I don't want people to just believe me. Oh my God, I heard it from Pat Brown. Got to be true. Yeah. Maybe Pat Brown is just not right on that one. Maybe another profiler had it better than me. And so there are definitely people on certain cases I disagree with. And then you have to weigh them out. You have to say, okay, this person gives this analysis, and this person gives this analysis. What are their how did they come to their analysis, their conclusions? What was it based on? What was their evidence that they used? And then you have to decide how much value each one of these opinions has, because the same thing happens in court. You got two experts, in something, and prosecution presents one, the defense presents the other, and they're diametrically opposed. Well, if there's only one truth, how the heck are they different? You know, so how did this person die?
Mm.
Well, the person died of, and then this person died. How can it be two different things? You know, you're supposed to be PhDs in this. Somebody either got paid a lot of money, or somebody sucks, or both. You know. So, oh, that's nice. Watching your profile on family murders is the best. Oh, alrighty. She was acquitted. Who was she acquitted? Oh, Alec? Really? Okay. The hospital covered up some
No,
of.
not Alec. Alec wasn't acquitted.
She
Lizzie
wasn't
Borden, I
acquitted.
think.
Because at least I think she was acquitted. Was it somebody else? Um,
No, Alec
wasn't
acquitted.
her. Okay. I'll have to look that
I
one
think
up.
she was referring to Lizzie Borden, was she?
Huh?
Was lady in the chat referring to Lizzie Borden?
Oh, that could be. You know, that's the problem with the chat room. I'm like, Lizzie Borden was not found guilty. She went on to live quite a nice, quiet life, and my opinion, got away with it. I do believe Lizzie Borden killed them. Yeah, I definitely. But yeah, they didn't prove it, and so yeah, she went on to live a nice, peaceful life. Lucky girl, you know. So, not Beverly Allen. She was. Oh, there we go. Lizzie Borden was acquitted. Oh, I like the name here too. Maybe she was bored. Bored. Oh yes, there we go. Died a rich spinster. Well, you know, it's always it's like half the time when you're texting or anything else, you know, and you miss one piece of the information, and then you glue something else to it. You're like, really, that happened? So that's why we have to have a sense of humor around here. You know, some people are just too serious, and you know, sometimes I screw up and I get the wrong. Like the other day, I just said I was talking about Jody Husenschut in the last hangout, and I just tried to listen to the beginning of the hangout to see whether it was recording properly, and I'm like, and Jody Husenschut was murdered in Minnesota, and I'm like, dang it, it wasn't Minnesota. But it's not an edited thing, so all I can do is type in the comments. Oops, you know. Oh well, that's the way.
We know what you mean.
Yeah, thank you. I fixed it later, but you know, I mean, sometimes and if people get all bent out of shape about those things, I'm like, anyway, my typing's off tonight. But we like your typing; it's very cute. Love these new words. We got all kinds of great new words. I mean. It's fun. Did we have any? Was there any other subject we were going to talk about that I missed here? I can't.
I think someone earlier on in the chat mentioned Ruth Ellis, which was it Gretchen mentioned her possibly? But I think that's an interesting case because Ruth Ellis was.
Ruth Ellis, is that a UK case?
Yeah, Ruth Ellis. She was.
I'm Googling. I'm paying attention to you.
She was the last woman to be hanged in Britain. 1955. Oh. She was only about 28, 30, something like that.
Really?
But she was hanged at Holloway, which is the women's prison.
She was a nightclub hostess. And she kind of had the mostest. She's very attractive.
Yeah, she had a great deal of sexual abuse when she was young. Her and her sister, and she. Like a lot of these women, she ended up, as an escort or whatever you want to call them.
Prostitute.
Yeah, that'll do. We'll have that.
I just don't like fake words. And escort service is prostitution service. She shot her lover, David Blakely. She was in the world of nightclub hostessing. Okay.
Yeah, well, Blakely. Again, we're into this area of the class thing because Blakely fancied himself as being quite an upper class guy. I think he was some sort of failed race car driver or something.
Oh, really?
And
but he had a race car.
He was a womanizer and he was a gambler, I think.
Right.
He was very abusive towards Ruth Ellis and women in general. And she ended up shooting him. And I think this is an interesting case because, okay, she shoots him.
Right.
No argument. No argument. She's killed him. She's committed murder.
Right.
Whether it was premeditated or not is questionable. Whether she was of sound mind, again, is questionable. But the controversy was that she was the last woman to be hanged. And I think her case actually contributed towards the death penalty being abolished in Britain.
Really fascinating. Yeah. And you know what is it? What I find so interesting, I talk about this a lot with the female cases, and I'm gonna really look into this one because supposedly they had a really bad relationship, and he supposedly punched her, and she caused her miscarriages, and she got pregnant a lot. Yeah. And then they said here that Blakely's, let's see, so I think the problem with the premeditation was this, which I think is kind of interesting. It says on April 1955, and Easter Sunday, she took a taxi to a second floor flat, where she thought Blakely would be. As she arrived, Blakely's car drove off, so she paid off the taxi and walked a quarter of a mile to the Magdalia pub, where she found Blakely's car parked outside. At around 9:30 p.m., Blakely and his friend Clive Gunnell emerged. Blakely passed Ruth waiting on the pavement when she stepped out of the doorway of Henshaw's, a newsagent, next to the place. As Blakely searched for the keys to his car, she took a .38 caliber Smith & Wesson revolver from her handbag and fired 5 shots at Blakely. The first shot missed. Ruth pursued Blakely as he started to run around the car, firing a second shot, which caused him to collapse on the pavement. She then stood over him and fired 3 more bullets, with one fired less than half an inch from his back, leaving powder burns on the skin. Ruth was seen to stand over Blakely as she repeatedly tried to fire the revolver's 6th shot, finally firing it into the ground. The bullet ricocheted and hit a bystander. I would say the premeditation thing is kind of clear, because there's 2 types of premeditation. One is where you actually plan the crime, where your plan is to kill the person, and you make the plan to do so. You follow through with the plan, and then the person appears, or you appear in front of them, and you then complete the plan. That's one premeditation. The second premeditation is when you have enough time between action A and action B to not do action B. So let's say, so clearly she was waiting for him. She followed him, and then she pulled the gun out. So this is about as premeditated as you can get. Then she shot him, and then she kept working on shooting him more and more and more, with lots of time in between. So she could have shot him once and then said, "Oh my God." But no, she was like, "Oh no, that wasn't enough." And so she then premeditated some more shooting and some more shooting. So I think they had the premeditation thing down cold.
So does that change? Does the law change if she was not of sound mind?
Okay, then we get into I'm going to look at this case because of the not of sound mind issue. And I pointed out Andrews, the Yates case is an issue. Then there's bunches of other cases with females where females often get to be labeled not of sound mind, to be insane at the time that they committed the crime, where men don't get that luxury. They're usually just because he killed that woman. Now, a man can have a crappy marriage. A man can have a crappy relationship. He can be abused by his wife, neglected by his wife, tortured by his wife or girlfriend or whatever. And yet when he goes and kills her, he just goes, that's it. He's a cold-blooded killer. A woman, she can, even without the evidence of all these bad things happening in a relationship, she suddenly, even if she kills somebody, they go, maybe she had a mental breakdown. So the woman gets this benefit of the doubt. And the problem comes down to this with me. I understand that there is an imbalance in relationships as far as male-female goes. I am willing to say that simply because of biology, although biology doesn't seem to be as important these days. But for me, a male person is physically stronger than a female person in general. And our societies have often had the male have more power in the relationship due to either earning money or his physique or whatever, societal standing, whatever. So there has always been an imbalance in general. So the concept being that a woman, therefore, when she gets into a relationship with a man, has less options and less ability to make choices as to how she's going to lead the relationship or escape the relationship or survive the relationship. So therefore, for example, let's say the guy is abusive. And so one night when he's sleeping, She puts a bullet in the back of his head.
Mm.
Did she have the choice to leave? So people will say, well, she didn't feel she had the choice to leave. She felt that no matter what she did, he would find her, or she would suffer some consequences. So therefore, she waited. He was asleep, put a bullet in the back of his head. But she could have left. Yeah. Andrea Yates killed 5 children, and in my opinion, she planned that. It was premeditated. And she made sure that, when she was going to do it, that no one would stop her from doing it. She killed one child after the other child, after the other child, after the other child. No voices were talking to her at that time. She had options. One of the options was to leave the home. I can't handle being around these children anymore. I can't stand my marriage. I can't stand being around the kids. I have to get away. And she had been institutionalized at different points where she had the freedom to not be there. So she could make the choice. So the question comes down to is, just because you're in a bad relationship and you're suffering, does that give you the right to premeditatedly murder somebody when you had the option of going to leave, or to go to a shelter, or to get help in some other way? Do you have the right to kill just because you're not having a good time and you're unhappy and or you feel stressed? But what's interesting is that that thing is almost never given to men. So if a man woke up one day and drowned all of his 5 children, nobody would have any issues. Female drowns all of her 5 children, she must have mental problems. So women get a break, and then people want to say, well, the sexes should be considered equal, and we shouldn't just say women are overly emotional, or it's their period, or they're in menopause. Yeah. We shouldn't, But yet, when the women kill, then those things are brought up mostly by defense teams, mind you, because they're not stupid. They're going to bring that up as a defense, and I find that I understand the disparity in the issues of power and control between male and female, but does that give you the right under the law to commit this kind of crime because you're not pleased with the situation and you didn't choose to do something else? So she was very premeditated. So I'll have to look into what she's doing. Bad childhood doesn't give you the right to kill people. No, it doesn't. Maybe her bad choices was what put her in this situation. She chose to go into prostitution. She chose to hook up with some sleazy guy, with a race car. Those are choices. Yeah. I'll have to look at the whole case. I don't know the case at all, so I'm going to be really interested to look into this one because of what you say.
It's a good one.
Yeah, this is going to be really interesting. At least somebody. Wow. Okay. Well, that's nice of you to say. Because it says your analysis of Keats. I think you're. Wait a minute. Yates, you mean? I'm thinking it's Keats. What poem did Keats write? Analysis of Yates was so informative. I was so ignorant of some of her actions' true meanings. Well, I have, interesting enough, I've had the actual opposite. I've gotten a lot of emails that say your analysis of Yates was so ignorant. I've gotten that one too. So it's really tricky. It's a very tough call, I think, and each society has to make the call, on what they think the society thinks is acceptable, as far as how things are handled, and I think it varies over time, and so this is going to be a really interesting one. And the U.S. goes through all this all the time with the Innocence Project, and I've seen things like when what's his name, Colin was let out. When was he let out? You know who I'm talking about, right? Colin. What's his name? The serial killer. I'm blanking on his last name. Come on, give me the last name.
American?
No, your guy.
Colin?
Huh?
Sorry, what was the first name? Colin?
I've lost my mind here. Okay, what's the guy that was just let out of prison? I've got the wrong name. Famous serial killer. They let him out, and then he started stalking women again. Killed him.
Famous serial killer let out of prison.
Yeah. It's DNA case. Oh crap! Why am I just blanking? First DNA case, UK. I just talked about him too. Oh, just look. First DNA. Oh, come on now. What's his name? Why can't I remember his name? Pitchfork. Pitchfork. Oh, I am right. Colin Pitchfork.
Colin Ireland.
Huh? Pitchfork. Yeah.
Colin Ireland.
No, Colin's Pitchfork. Colin Pitchfork.
Okay.
And he was the first person convicted by DNA, but they let this guy out of prison. And I couldn't believe they let him out. I thought it was the most bizarre thing I'd ever heard. So when did they let him out? So he was a child murderer, right? So he was arrested, sentenced to life in prison. They gave him a 30-year minimum sentence. He was granted parole in 2021 and was released. Okay, so then he was released in 2021, even though he's a child murderer, a child serial killer. And then after he got let out, so they did all his parole reviews, and then they let him out, and he was moved to an undisclosed open prison. And then in 2007, he was seen walking around Bristol. But then they recalled him because apparently he was like stalking women. So something like that. So anyway, he's back. Okay, now he went back to prison. Yeah, and then in autumn of 2022, they're considering releasing Pitchfork again. So, it's like the guy's a serial killer. Why the heck are you putting him out on the street? So so it's interesting how each system has its levels of, the process they go through and how long they're supposed to stay in prison and when they're supposed to be allowed out regardless of the crime they've committed. It's fascinating and what upsets people and what doesn't upset people. I personally look. That's the bugs again.
It's not that uncommon. I've dealt with a couple of people. I could tell. Well, I won't. It's too long for me to explain all the details. But there have been a couple of people who have committed, rape and murder of small children who've been let out and ended up where I work. Because they've supposedly had alcohol problems 30 years ago, or whatever.
Right.
And they've committed very heinous acts afterwards and are now back in prison.
Well, it's kind of funny because there's just one that just came out in the U.S. with the Innocence Project that worked to get this guy out, right? And he was out like 30 days. And after everybody's raving about how they got this innocent guy out of prison, 30 days goes by and he committed a crime. and I'm sure they're like going, dang it, I hate that when it happens. Because it has to be embarrassing, you know what I mean? Because you really believe the guy's this great guy, and he's really a good guy. And a lot of psychopaths, murderous psychopaths, are very convincing people. They can be charming, super charming. And I don't mean in the way that, a lot of people think. You're like, oh, no, Ted Bundy was so charming. Not necessarily. But they do practice this. And so, you meet them and you look at them and they're just really nice and they talk to you really nice. And then you think they're telling you they're innocent and you're like, man, poor guy.
If you've heard of Jack Unterweger, the Austrian fella who
Jack Unterweger,
Unterweger, Unterweger.
Oh, Unterweger. Okay, sounds very Dutch.
Fella. No, Austrian actually,
really?
But he murdered someone, a teenager, I think, in the early 70s, mid 70s maybe.
Uh-huh.
And then he became a sort of cause célèbre for prison reformers, people that said, you that believe that retribution should go hand in hand with rehabilitation. He was released. He became a very sort of famous writer, supposedly a great intellectual. And of course, he went on a killing spree. And
really?
In fact, he went to America and killed quite a few American prostitutes, I think was his thing.
Jack Unterweger. I gotta look. That's another one I'm gonna have to look up. I've got so many cases. I'm gonna be doing the show till 120.
Well, Unterweger is a really interesting case.
Wow.
If you go on YouTube, you can see him being interviewed on some.
Right. He was born in Austria. That's where the Unterweger. Oh, Unterweger.
Yeah,
okay. Yeah. Born in Austria. So, all right. And then he did live in Austria, West Germany, Czechoslovakia, and the United States. And he's supposed to, that the problem people have with rehabilitation is this. And I push this book over and over again. It's Stanton Samanow's book, Dr. Samanow. And he wrote a book called Inside the Criminal Mind. And it's brilliant because he was a psychologist who, Dr. Samanow worked at St. Elizabeth's Hospital in Washington, D.C., the criminally insane. And he believed a lot of these people were very he could rehabilitate them. He's a psychologist, going to work with them and all. And he finally realized they were all playing him. He was being manipulated like you wouldn't believe. Yeah. And then he realized the thing that was true. And Dr. Samanow and I love this guy. I said something on television one night, which was I don't believe in crime of passions, and I said something against that, and I was attacked for it. And then I saw Dr. Samanow wrote me on email, and your appearance on such and such a show, and I'm like, oh God, he's going to attack me. And then I clicked on it, he goes, you're a breath of fresh air, and I'm like, yay, really? And so then I started reading his books, and I'm like, I was so amazed because what he learned, because he had the rehabilitative mind of a person who wants to do mental health therapy, right? You know what I mean? So you want to help people, and you go in with the concept. What he learned over time was that when a person is a psychopath of that degree, you cannot fix them. They are not fixable. And so the question is, what do you do if this person is going to come out of prison, or they're going to be released or whatever? What do you do about them? And he came up with he's the only person I've ever thought had the correct idea on the rehabilitation, which is not rehabilitation at all. What it is I know you're a psychopath, and I know you could give a crap about any other human being on the face of the planet except yourself. So because of your level of narcissism, what I have to do is appeal to your narcissistic logic. So I have to get you to understand that certain actions would be more beneficial to you than other actions. Not because they're right or wrong, because you would hurt somebody. That's meaningless. It's what will benefit you the most. So if you can convince a person that, killing people has not really worked out for you, because of this, and that, you could use your evil ways in a better way, which would be more useful to you. Again, you have to be very careful because they don't care about other human beings. So he understood that he could rehabilitate some of his clients, some of the patients, by helping them get a better way of getting over without as much violence. So that's the only thing you can do. Yeah. But you're not really rehabilitating them, because they're going back into society and they don't have a changed mind or changed mental condition. So now it's true, as they get older, a lot of times you find that psychopaths get nicer as they get older because they are more needy. So I've run into psychopaths in example in rehab places where they're like, let's say they're an 80-year-old drug lord, killer, whatever he is, you know what I mean? But he is so sweet. But he's like Samson without his hair, He can't, he's in a wheelchair. Can't walk, can't kill. Well, he can still kill. I've had wheelchair people attack people, so that's not true. But he may have enough of a condition at that point to manipulate people in a different way. So instead of being a drug lord, running a whole, whatever cartel, he might then just ingratiate himself with the nurses and play a ladies' man with the nurses because they think he's so cool. He may get off on that. And serial killers who go to prison are often really good about getting along with the guards, because and with journalists and with women online, and men online, whatever, dating online and then getting married in prison, because they can't kill at that point, or they don't have a way to kill that they like. So then they start manipulating their environment and the people in that environment, or the people coming into that environment. So So there's ways, yeah, that they don't actually commit the same crimes again, but that doesn't mean they're not psychopaths. It's just, and then if you let them out and they haven't changed their real mentality, you can't predict whether they're just going to go do whatever they damn well please. They're not rehabilitated because you can't rehabilitate them. So I want to see what she had to say. Helen Bailey was murdered by her reformed prisoner, now husband, new husband. Oh, I say now husband. No, if he's not a husband anymore, if he killed her. Okay, Helen Bailey was murdered by her reformed prisoner, new husband, Ian Stewart. Interesting. Oh, wait a minute. He murdered his first wife. Sorry. That's kind of sadly funny. So she married a wife murderer. And she thought he wouldn't murder her. That's kind of like the woman who marries the secretary that marries the boss that she cheated on with while he was married, and then says, "I didn't think he'd cheat on me." Helen, I'm going to have to put. I'm putting all these people in so I can do shows on them because these are just so interesting. Helen Bailey murder. I have to check that one out too. But yeah, it's. You can't predict that. And the person could come out and actually look like they're really in great shape for a few years. And then what? Again, I point out that serial killers don't kill necessarily constantly either. So they may have years where they're getting a tremendous amount of attention. They're in the news. They could write a book. Everybody loves them. And so for maybe 6 years, they don't do any criminal acts. And then after 6 years, you don't get the second book with your publisher. So you're looking older, the woman dumped you, whatever. And you're like, screw it. It's kind of like falling off the wagon, People can do really well as long as they have good motivation, right? So, losing weight, oh my gosh, I'm going to be in a new relationship, so I'm going to lose weight. I'm recently divorced, so I'm going to lose weight. And then you lose weight, and then you can't find anybody to date. So you say, screw this, I'm going to eat again. You get fat again. But food, drugs, sex, murder, falling off the wagon happens with all of that. And so as long as things, you can see that things are, you got hope, you might be able to stay on the wagon, and then when life gets tough, you're like, screw it. You just go back to whatever your old habit was, So he had a kindly gray beard. Helen Bailey is a very interesting case for sure. Terrible fate. She seemed a good but naive person. Yes, but again, I'm going to point this out. A lot of women who hook up with murderers in prison are highly narcissistic, because the problem for them is that hooking up with the guy who works down the street, the guy who works at Home Depot, the guy who collects trash, the guy who runs a fishing shop, boring. When you hook up with that guy, you're just a regular person, you see? It doesn't help you feel bigger about yourself. But if you can hook up with a killer, you become somebody, even if it's weird. You become some really cool, weird, different person who's doing something amazing. The guy at Home Depot is not going to do that for you. So a lot of times there's a narcissism problem that causes women and men to hook up with killers as a romantic concept. So I don't give them quite the I'm just naive. I didn't know. I was such a big heart. I just couldn't help. I thought he was innocent. I thought he changed. Yeah, I don't know. What was this?
And there's a sort of romanticized version of crime, isn't there? People, they find it alluring.
Well, is it, or is it because for them it has benefits? Because what is alluring about a guy who murders women?
Wouldn't be to me, but I mean, it's like.
What about a woman? What about a woman who murders men?
Violence,
Well, I believe the problem is, I say, if you compare that to regular life, why do women go on the sites? There's the prison dating sites and death row dating sites. You can go on those, and first of all, it's also easy to get a date because I know that as a 66-year-old woman, I have a hard time getting dates. I don't much date, but if I go on the death row prison site, I'm gonna get like 10 or 12 different dudes. you know, and I can write to them all, and they're all going to lie to me because they're all psychopaths, right? They're all go, "Oh my God, Pat Brown, I've always loved you. You're the best thing ever. You're so gorgeous. Your body is just hot." Sure. I don't see a wrinkle on your face. You're just, I mean, and they can write so well. So it's like, "Dear Pat, my adorable Pat, I've just been sitting here in my cell all day long, and all I can think about is you. And I love you because you see the real me. Even though your profile, you understand where I've got blah, 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 and that is much better than the dude who goes, yeah, okay, you want to go to Olive Garden?" It's like, not really. Because in real life, first of all, it's hard to find people, and secondly, when you find them, they're not as usually exciting. They're like regular people, and they're not psychopaths, so they don't have this, the golden tongue, silver tongue, what do you want to call it? Yeah. They're not good. They're like, what? I watched a movie last night. Yeah, it was on World War II, and you're like, okay, but the psycho in prison, ooh, he's hot, So, and so it becomes an ego thing. That you get something, you're getting ego stroked by having this relationships with people who you shouldn't be having relationships with, but they know that. And so you've got problems and they can take advantage of that. But it's not because so much that you're naive. It's that you want what you want and you're willing to go places that you shouldn't go to get that. And even though it's probably fake is better than real. Because if fake makes you thrilled, if fake makes you happy, if it gives you your fantasy, until the guy comes out and then you actually marry him and kills you, it was all good. You should have stayed in prison. It was way better when you were there. So much better, But that, for years, that's, people have done, people used to write letters back and forth for years, and they were in two different locations, and they used to write these beautiful letters with the great handwriting and all that, and it was very romantic, and then eventually they meet and marry and all that stuff. So that's kind of gone by the wayside. So it's almost nobody to write anymore except the guys in prison, because nobody will write you except those guys. Yeah. And men fall for women in prison too. So and women fall for women and men fall for men in prison. So I'm saying the whole gambit is there. And because they can't do anything but write a letter, they can't access the internet, and so that's how they do the letter thing. And I get letters from serial killers, and they're pretty, they're very, very impressive. They really are, and they never start out with "Dear Ms. Brown." It's always "Dear Pat." Always. I've never seen one.
What sort of things do they ask you? What are the letters normally about?
I got, for example,
you understand me so well.
Happy Face Killer. He's famous out of Washington. Happy Face Killer. He wrote me a really long letter, and it was like, it's always, there's two types. There's the ones that say they're innocent and they want me to. They know that I'm a great profiler. It's always I'm a great, and nobody ever says you're a questionable profiler. I thought, okay, you're one of many. No, you're the best profiler. I know I'm so impressed by you. Right, whatever. And then they go on to say that they're innocent and how they would love me to help them, blah, blah, blah. But then there's other ones like the Happy Face Killer who confessed to his murder. So he's not trying to get out. But he wrote me and it's like, "Dear Pat, I just think you're just really a fascinating woman. I've read some of your stuff. I've seen you on TV. You're just really amazing. And I think you really understand, people like myself." And then he, wants to explain his crimes to me and his mentality. And it's interesting because in one way, they think I can understand them. On the other hand, they don't necessarily understand that I really understand them. It's their fantasy that I understand them in a way that we meld, that we meet, that we have minds that come together. And I'm like, yeah, no, actually, absolutely not. But they like to play that game, and they write so well. They don't write like a psychotic person would write with a whole bunch of stuff. You're like, what the hell are they talking about? No, they write really well. and they're very fluent, and they have good camaraderie, and it's amazing. They're quite good, and so it's hard not to like them. I could read that and go, happy face killer. I could be his buddy, And I've never communicated ever with a serial killer in prison. I don't do it. I refuse to do it. I refuse to write a book with them. I won't do that kind of stuff. So they write me a letter, but I've never ever written anybody back. But there's money in it, and to write a nonfiction book on somebody, one serial killer, the other, and get into all that. And sometimes I believe, sometimes get taken by them, because when I did the show on Tommy Lynn Sells, who one of my friends who writes, she's a fictional nonfiction author, and I used to do a lot of stuff on a blog site with her, and she wrote, I think it's Through the Window. That's the name of the book. Forgot. Anyway, she believed that Tommy Lynn Sells was the one who killed the little boy, and his mother didn't do it, and the mother, has been released, and a lot based on that book and Tommy Lynn Sells not doing it. I mean, being the killer. And I personally think that she spent too much time talking to Tommy Lynn Sells, too much time getting, those letters back and forth, where somehow you start believing what they say.
Yeah.
Because they're so friendly, and they want to be your friend, and even if they're bad people, we all respond to people wanting to be our friends. We do. I mean, it's just kind of a human thing. Yeah. So
human nature.
Yeah. So should I give you the website name? Do you want? But I used to use this for one of my classes. I used to tell people in my class for the course that they had to go online, and they had to pick out two men or two women or whatever they're interested in as their dates, and tell us why they picked those people. And it was amazing, because I swear to God, this is actually true. If you go on Match.com, and you go on the prison website, the website for dating, Match.com has nothing but creepy people. But the prison site, every one of them is hot. They're great. They're the coolest people ever. They always want to do everything you want to do. They want to walk on the beach and do poetry and be honest. That's because they're all psychopaths and they don't know how to lie. And over here on Match.com, they're like, it's like, oh, I just want to know if you'll have sex with me. Okay, that's really not how you get something. But but over on the prison site, they're so slick. They're so slick. And so everybody came back and they're like, I chose Martha. She's awesome. She's going to be in prison for life. But the two men she killed, she couldn't help doing it. But she loves cooking. She loves dogs. She's and so I made them tell me exactly why they wanted to date this person. And it was funny because it was so true. You look at the thing, you go, I get it. They're actually very attractive.
Yeah.
But if you're going to go to begin with on a prison website, there's some issue going on here, especially if you're going on death row and you're picking out a boyfriend or girlfriend from death row. You got issues. Yeah. You got issues.
It's just beyond belief. Yeah. I can't get it.
It's craziness, but that's the world we live in. So it's pretty funny. But I think some of our folks are heading out. No, we've been on here quite a while now, haven't we? Not 3 hours.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. It's been. I always knew I was going to have fun talking with you, Joe, because I liked you from the beginning. The first time you just commented on YouTube. Yeah. I remember people. I do. I mean, it's. Some people I see them come in a few times and I'm like, oh, I'm going to end up blocking that person. I just know it. And then there's the other ones. I'm like, I like that person. You're on the ladder.
It's been an absolute pleasure. I mean, and I never thought that I'd ever spend 3 hours chatting to you when I first heard that 20-minute radio interview on Madeleine McCann. But it's been, like I say, absolute pleasure. It really is.
Well, absolutely. And I definitely have to have you come back because you got some really cool ideas on things and some really cool cases that, some of these I haven't even heard of or thought it was, but I want to talk about. Oh, isn't this nice? Lisa S says, thank you for calling in, Joe. It was a great show. And
Yeah,
I knew you were going to be popular.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely great. And I think it's going to, these shows that call-ins are really popular with people just, wanting to listen to them. And so they're fun to do. And, when I started this, this is true. See, this community has the coolest members. See? If this were a live show, we'd have all these crazy people coming in here and disturbing everything. So I like my community, and I think that makes everybody much more pleasurable. Oh, listen to that. See, Doreen says, very enjoyable hearing you two chat, Pat and Joe. Yay.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
thank you, Doreen.
So we'll have to have you back on another time. So you'll have to come up with, some more things you want to talk about, and then we'll do it again. Why not? I have no problem at all.
Looking forward to your future videos, especially the future shows, especially the Jack the Ripper one.
Jack the Ripper. I already have the whole thing planned. It's just I have to, that one's going to require a little bit more, work to put everything together. So I have a coherent show because I'm generally somewhat incoherent. So, so I probably won't do that one live. I may do that one actually as just a standalone. But I rather do things. I always like things live better, just because it's, when you do things as a taped video, you spend all your time worrying that you're screwing up, and then you think and I don't edit anything. So if I screw up when I do the video and it's not live, I can't. And it's like it's not the same as when you're live. You go, oh yeah, I just screwed up.
Yeah, no. Well, this is it.
Yeah.
But no, sometimes the mistakes are the best things.
Yeah.
Sometimes
it's hard.
They're the fun part.
Right, but when it's a tape video and there's no one you're talking to, you're not supposed to screw up as much, you know what I'm saying? And that's why everybody just edits their videos heavily. And I have absolutely no patience for editing. So I'm a one and done. One and done. So anyway, thank you everybody for being here. I know this is going for the US. It's a Memorial Day weekend. I think it's Memorial Day weekend. A lot of people going out of town. I'm not, so my weekend's
Independence Day.
Yeah, so that'll be on what day are we on? We're on Friday, so Monday. Monday will be 4th of July for the U.S. Independence Day. So a lot of people are going away. I don't know how many people will be around for the show on Sunday, but if you're not in the U.S., you could care less. So you'll show up, or if you just don't have any place to go on, Sunday, I hope you'll be here. It'll be the 3 p.m. EST on Sunday, and it'll be a really interesting show on Judy Smith. I find it a fascinating case. So, but now I have all these new cases I've got to work on. So, thank you for being here, Joe. You are fantastic, and thank you for everybody else for being here as well.